You've heard the term light year thousands of times, but trust me, you have never truly understood it. By tome, problems, life, and comb, end quote. We toss it around casually. It appears in science fiction films, in news about NASA, inside textbooks, even in everyday expressions whenever someone wants to imply very far. The familiarity itself creates the illusion of comprehension. It is like walking through a doorway every day and believing you know what lies beyond it, until someone opens it fully and you discover it is not a living room but an entire universe. A light year is such a doorway. It is not just a number, not merely a technical label. It is a boundary test for human perception, a measurement designed to reveal whether our brains, built for hunting fields and tribal survival, can even begin to grasp the scale of the cosmos. We believe we understand distance. Humanity has spent its existence measuring the world. Footsteps, journeys, borders, continents. We draw maps, build roads, place milestones, distances like 5 kilometers, 200 kilometers, or even 40. 000 kilometers around Earth feel large but still imaginable. A highway, a long drive, a flight across continents, they fit inside the experiential vocabulary of a species that once walked everywhere to survive. We think that is far, yet in truth, it is nothing more than the courtyard of the cosmic stadium. Now break that frame. If the distance from New York to Los Angeles is a long stride, then the distance from Earth to the Moon is a leap into emptiness. 384,000 kilometers without path, landmark, or resting point. But even that number compresses into a digestible symbol. 3 days of travel. Your mind instantly relaxes. 3 days. What you actually understand is not the distance, it is the experience of waiting. The brain refuses the incomprehensible by disguising it as time. But at the next level, that evasive trick collapses. 150 million kilometers to the sun, there is no flight time you can attach to that. No felt equivalence you can latch onto. This is the first moment where distance ceases to be a human idea. The brain stops building models. Numbers become abstract symbols, hollow, untethered to emotion or intuition. Then we reach the stars. 40 trillion kilometers to Proxima Centauri, the nearest star beyond the sun, and the mind gives up entirely. It cannot anchor this to experience. It cannot mentally walk it or weight it. It is no longer a number. It is a dead glyph pretending to represent something real. Here, the light year enters as cognitive salvation. Without it, the universe would drown us in meaningless digits. A light year is humanity's desperate attempt to compress the abyss, to shrink the unfathomable into something speakable. Yet the irony is that even when we use it, we still don't understand it. We simply replace one incomprehensible symbol with another and hope it feels less terrifying. A light year is the distance light, the fastest thing that exists, must race for an entire year without pausing to complete. It is the point where the cosmos forces us to use its ultimate speed limit as the yardstick. And once this truth sinks in, a realization follows. Everything you once called far was just a patch of grass on the cosmic field. Why does this matter? Because it forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. Human intuition was never built to understand the universe. Your brain evolved to track daylight, rivers, village boundaries, and prey migration, not 46 trillion kilometers. It is optimized for survival scale, not galactic scale. So when you encounter something beyond instinctive comprehension, your mind retreats behind vague language like very far, infinite, or space is big. Phrases that flatten awe into passivity and conceal the true enormity. There is irony here. We are the only species in the solar system capable of calculating distances we cannot even imagine, and the only species aware that we cannot imagine them. It is both a philosophical tragedy and a triumph. A light year does not break logic, it breaks the illusion that logic was ever sufficient for reality. It exposes a hidden truth. We live in a universe so vast that your sensory system, your metaphors, your internal scales, simply have no access to its real size. And yet through mathematics, physics, telescopes, and curiosity, we still reach toward it, even when intuition surrenders. Look up at the night sky. You think you are seeing now, but you are staring into the past. The sunlight hitting your skin left the sun over 8 minutes ago. You see Sirius as it was nearly 10 years in the past. You see Betelgeuse as it appeared in the Renaissance. You see Polaris as it shone when Shakespeare wrote his earliest plays. Every star is a time machine. Every light year is the rhythm by which the cosmos reveals how deep now really is. When you begin to grasp this, you are not merely learning physics, you are learning humility. You taste a strange form of liberation, the liberation of being small yet capable of comprehending the vast. That is why a light year is both simple and destructive. It masquerades as a measurement, but it is actually a mirror showing you the limits of imagination and the astonishing power of intellect. The moment humanity grasped what a light year actually represents, the universe changed. Not physically, of course, but perceptually. Before this conceptual breakthrough, the cosmos was merely a decorative ceiling, a dome sprinkled with mysterious lights. The stars were lanterns, gods, holes in the sky, symbols in myth. They were close, approachable, personal. They were part of our stories because we imagined them to be within reach of our world. Then science revealed a cruel symmetry. The more accurately we learned to measure space, the more it moved away from us. Once distance was quantified in light years, the universe was no longer above us, it was shown to be beyond us. The sky transformed from spiritual wallpaper into a landscape whose scale dwarfed comprehension. And whether people admit it or not, that realization rewired civilization. Understanding the light year shattered a comforting illusion, the idea that reality was proportioned for us. Before this measurement existed, distance was a thing humans conquered. We mapped continents, crossed oceans, encircled the globe. The planet felt big, but tractable. Even the moon, though unreachable, seemed like something a heroic age might attain. Distance was challenge, not impossibility. But a light year is not challenge. It is revelation. It says, you are not living in a world built to your scale. You are living in a universe indifferent to your scale. The psychological shift is profound. We are forced to abandon intuition and adopt abstraction because intuition dies at cosmic distances. This is why light years matter. They did not merely extend our map. They obliterated the idea that space could be mapped the way Earth was. The first effect was cognitive. Numbers like 1 trillion became real. A light year forced mathematics onto reality so harshly that it changed how societies thought. Capitalism could not exist without abstract numbers. Neither could modern astrophysics. A light year helped normalize conceptual quantities beyond experience. The second effect was philosophical. When you learn that sunlight itself travels 8 minutes to reach your face, you stop believing the universe is immediate. You inherit a delayed cosmos. What you see is never what is only what was. Past and present collapse. Perception becomes archival. The light year forces you to confront that the universe has a temporal thickness. The third effect was existential. Once distances are in light years, you understand you will never visit most of reality. Humans evolved imagining that if something is visible, it is reachable. The light year terminated that instinct. It made us confront scale as a barrier, not as a terrain. Paradoxically, this did not crush curiosity, it amplified it. Because when you realize you will never touch most of the universe, you begin to treasure the capacity to understand it. Knowledge becomes participation. Thought becomes exploration. The mind becomes spacecraft. Understanding the light year did something extraordinary. It relocated adventure from the body to the intellect. From that point onward, the greatest expeditions were not voyages of ships, but voyages of equations, telescopes, and models. Our imagination became a propulsion system. The physics classroom became a starship. But there is another dimension, social. A civilization that understands light years cannot remain self-centered. It becomes impossible to maintain ancient cosmologies where Earth is central and humanity is meaning's ruler. Light years decentralize ego. They dethrone species. They reveal insignificance and dignity, simultaneously insignificant in body, dignified in cognition. This is why astronomy historically destabilized empires. Once distance was understood, the idea of divine proximity collapsed. Gods retreated, laws faced scrutiny, human authority had to justify itself without the sky's endorsement. But there is yet another layer: emotional. Once people internalize light years, the night sky stops being decoration and becomes a message system. Each star becomes not a dot, but a memory. A light year implies that even the present is layered with echoes. There is something quietly poetic about living inside a universe where seeing is time travel, and poetry matters here more than you might think. A light year reframes loneliness. We realize we are one intelligence poised in a darkness so deep that we cannot walk across it physically. Yet somehow, we interpret it, quantify it, describe it, even predict it. This knowledge produces a paradoxical comfort. We belong not because we fit the universe, but because we can comprehend the fact that we do not. There is also a technological consequence. Once societies understood the light year, they had to confront the delay baked into communication. If humanity ever colonizes other star systems, light years become political weapons, time barriers. You cannot rule star systems in real time. Orders take years to arrive. Replies take years to return. Light years imply autonomy. They imply decentralized futures. Planetary identity replaces imperial identity. Thus, understanding the light year changed not just astronomy but governance, agency, diplomacy, and imagination. And finally, there is the effect on meaning. For thousands of years, people assumed purpose was local. The village was the world. The kingdom was the cosmos. But when the cosmos expands to trillions of light years, purpose cannot stay provincial. The human mind begins to expand its domain. Ethics must consider species-level futures. Philosophy must account for cosmic time. Memory must stretch across millennia. The light year is not just a unit of measure, it is the first invitation for humanity to grow psychologically. Think about it. Only a species capable of abstraction can even invent the notion of a light year. And only one capable of humility can accept what it implies. Understanding the light year awakened a different kind of intelligence, one that knows its fragility but celebrates its awareness. That shift is irreversible. Once you know the scale of the universe, you cannot return to mythic skies. You cannot look at stars as ornaments. You cannot imagine existence as tailored. You are forced to think rigorously, almost painfully, about scale, about time, about significance. You learn that understanding and imagination are the only tools that give humanity gravity in the universe, because physically we have none. And here lies the ultimate transformation. When humans learned what a light year is, the universe stopped being background and became foreground. It became a problem to solve, a frontier to interrogate, a source of humility and identity. We no longer stand beneath the heavens, we stand inside them intellectually. A light year changed astronomy. But more importantly, it changed us. It widened the horizon of what we consider possible, stretched the borders of our emotional capacity, and forced us to build minds large enough to house distances we cannot touch. That is the power of cognition. Scale does not shrink understanding, it deepens it. And perhaps the most profound consequence is this. When you internalize what a light year means, you stop asking, "How big is the universe?" and start asking, "What kind of mind is capable of confronting a universe this big?" Knowledge is rarely acquired alone. Even in the most solitary moments, reading, listening, watching, thinking, the human mind is never isolated. It leans on other minds, other questions, other voices. Civilization itself is nothing but a chain of ideas handed from one brain to the next. Understanding the universe works the same way. No individual, no laboratory, no single telescope ever grasped cosmic truth on its own. It took communities, messy, argumentative, collaborative communities, to get here. That is why, if exploring light years and cosmic scale fascinates you, you belong among others who are equally challenged by these ideas. Curiosity only reaches its potential when it is shared. You might think subscribing to content, commenting beneath a video, or joining discussions is trivial, a modern reflex in a digital age. But look deeper. In practice, it is the exact same mechanism that drove the scientific revolution: exchange, critique, curiosity clustering together until insight accumulates. The internet is not a distraction when used well. It is simply the newest forum for the oldest human impulse to learn visibly. So consider this less a request than an alignment. If these ideas shift the way you think, subscribing is a signal not to me, but to yourself that you are the kind of mind that returns to questions rather than fleeing from them. Discussion does something else as well. It forces your brain out of passive reception into active synthesis. A mind that only consumes knowledge behaves like dark matter present but not interacting. A mind that speaks, challenges, refines, and listens behaves like stars emitting, reflecting, energizing others. Education becomes luminous only when it escapes silence. This is especially true with topics like light years. To grapple with distances larger than intuition, the brain needs friction. It needs disagreement, confusion, clarifying analogies, metaphors offered by strangers, all the messy, awkward, essential interactions that refine thinking. Community isn't decoration for knowledge, it is its catalytic environment. Think of how ideas spread historically. Copernicus did not change the world by publishing alone. Kepler questioned him. Galileo defended him. Newton extended him. Every breakthrough was a chain reaction. Subscribing, staying connected, is modern humanity's version of keeping that chain intact. Why does this matter for understanding cosmic scale? Because intellectually, light years are not simple facts. They are disorienting. Most people's first reaction isn't comprehension, but vertigo. 1 light year is an abstraction, 10,000 is a wound to instinct. Without being carried inside a dialogue, that discomfort becomes dismissal. People retreat into space is big instead of wrestling with how big and why it matters. But when you return to discussions, ask questions, read what others saw differently, your brain begins to stretch. Neural nets reorganize. The impossible slowly becomes conceivable. Subscription isn't just following, it is returning enough times for understanding to sediment. There is a scientific reason this works. Learning theory calls it distributed cognition. Insights that seem too heavy for one mind become manageable when distributed among many. Dialogue is how humans collectively lift intellectual weight. So if a video makes you pause, if a sentence forces you to rethink, you are already halfway into the process, and discussion is simply how you complete it. This is why communities form around astronomy, physics, cosmology, philosophy, because people sense instinctively that grappling with scale changes them, and transformations require witnesses. A mind evolving in private risks fading. A mind evolving among others crystallizes into identity. There is a psychological layer too. When you subscribe, you become a participant in an unfolding narrative, not a passerby. You say, in effect, I want to think with others who think like this. It's a declaration of belonging, a tiny rebellion against intellectual isolation, and perhaps the subtle truth is this: the universe is vast, and insignificance can feel suffocating. People instinctively seek points of anchoring, tribes of thought, circles of curiosity. Discussion and engagement offer that anchor. They remind you that while you may be one organism on a pale dot, you are part of a species capable of building meaning through shared inquiry. Look at scientific culture, conferences, peer review, collective debate. Science is social. It is not the lone genius discovering truth. It is thousands of minds refining error. The comment box under a video is crude compared to a journal, but philosophically it is the same gesture, the will to interact rather than consume. Subscribing is similar. You do not subscribe to a person, you subscribe to a trajectory, a long-term conversation. It is a recognition that attention is an investment and that some questions are worth returning to. If galaxies and light years impress you today, they will still provoke you tomorrow. A subscription is simply a bookmark for your future curiosity. There is also accountability. When you join a community, you don't just learn, you contribute. You shape what is explored, what is clarified, what is challenged. Your presence becomes part of the ecosystem. Silence has no gravitational pull, but participation does. It bends the path of the collective mind. This is why I invite, not command you to subscribe and join the conversation. There is value in ideas speaking across minds. There is value in hearing your reaction, your confusion, your counterthought, your questions. There is value in knowing where your intuition struggled and what image helped you reconcile it. That information isn't for me, it is for others who share your struggle but haven't yet voiced it. One of the quirks of cosmic study is that comprehension feels solitary but is actually communal. Everyone thinks they are the only one who doesn't get it. Everyone secretly hopes someone else asks the question they fear to ask aloud. When you join discussion, you become that someone, the one who unlocks understanding for others. And if this content resonates, stay. Subscribe not because the algorithm likes it, but because you want to stay in the orbit of thought that challenges you, thought that does not flatter instinct but expands it. A light year revealed how small we are, but communities of inquiry remind us how extraordinary it is that we can understand our smallness. This channel, or whatever medium you encounter this through, is simply one node in that growing network. Be part of it, not as a spectator but as a thinker. After all, what is the point of looking at stars if you do not share what you see? We like to believe we understand distance. The modern world reinforces this illusion. We carry maps in our pockets. Our phones estimate walking time to restaurants. Airline apps show flight duration between countries. We speak confidently about thousands of miles, cross oceans in hours, circle the planet in less than 2 days. Technology tricks us into thinking that distance is conquered, but this belief is deceptive. What we truly understand is not distance but movement. We don't grasp kilometers or miles, we grasp minutes and hours. When you hear that something is 400 miles away, you don't imagine 400 miles, you imagine a drive, a flight, a train ride. You imagine travel, not space itself. Distance is experienced as time, friction, or waiting. The kilometers dissolve into narrative. This is why the brain fails catastrophically when confronted with cosmic scale. It never learned to understand space abstractly. It learned to understand journeys. Even when we speak of the moon, we smuggle time into the idea. 3 days by spacecraft. Mars becomes 8 months. Jupiter becomes years. What we comprehend instinctively is duration, not extent. Now strip time away. Imagine pure space, no roads, no vehicles, no reference points, just vast separation. The human mind flounders, reaching for metaphor. That is where distance ceases being intuition and becomes cognition. Take the familiar. Earth's circumference 40,000 kilometers. You can visualize a globe. Imagine a plane route, a cruise around the planet. The number has meaning because we attach it to experience, to photographs of Earth, to stories of circumnavigation, to the sensation of travel compressed by engines. But scale it slightly upward. Earth to Moon 384,000 kilometers. That is nearly 10 times the circumference of the planet. Yet because Apollo did it in 3 days, we compress it back into an experience, reachable. We force it back into the realm of time, 3 days, because our minds cannot hold 10 Earths worth of empty space. Now scale again. Earth to Sun, 150 million kilometers. Our strategies collapse. We have no experience to attach to it. No one travels that. No narrative fits it. The brain reaches for metaphor very far and collapses into vagueness. The number is too large to fold into intuition. This is what makes cosmic distances dangerous to thought. They masquerade as numbers when they are, in fact, ruptures in instinct. They break the calibration system evolution installed. The worlds we evolved to navigate were measured in hundreds of meters, not millions of kilometers. Our ancestors needed to understand where the river was, not where the nearest star lay. So distance at cosmic scale requires a conceptual prosthetic mathematics, visualization, metaphor. Without it, we mistake familiarity for comprehension. But the deception cuts even deeper. Technology shrinks continents into triviality. You can wake up in Paris, fall asleep in Tokyo. You can board a screen and be everywhere at once. These conveniences convince us that space has surrendered, when in truth, it has not. We simply circumvented it with machines. The real test of comprehension comes when you remove technology's illusion. Consider how far you have actually traveled physically. In your entire life, your body has likely moved no more than a few tens of thousands of kilometers relative to Earth. Even astronauts, the furthest traveling humans, barely touch the moon, 250,000 kilometers, a microscopic speck at astronomical scale. Humanity collectively has traveled nowhere. Our sense of mobility is symbolic, not physical. This realization is unsettling. We do not live in a large world, we live in a tiny world with large illusions. The Earth feels sprawling because our bodies are small, but in reality, Earth is a grain of sand in a forest of galaxies. The distances we think we understand are merely compressed illusions, stitched together by speed. The most insidious illusion is this: Earth feels central because we know nothing larger firsthand. Cosmic distance reveals that we are provincial creatures with planetary blinders. We claim to know space. Yet the furthest physical human footprint is 250,000 kilometers less than 1 light second. That is the measure of our actual reach. Let that sink in. Everything humans have ever touched beyond Earth sits inside a single second of light travel. The universe is not far away, it is unreachable. This should reorder our thinking. Distance is not something we travel, it is something we model. Understanding this distinction allows humility to enter, and humility is the necessary precondition for intellectual expansion. When we say the nearest star is 24 light-years away, we are speaking a sentence we cannot experience. It is an act of faith in mathematics. We know it is true, but we cannot feel it. This is unlike every everyday distance. You can feel what 10 miles is, or 500 miles, or a transcontinental flight. You cannot feel 24 light-years. It has no sensory correlate. It is a wound carved into comprehension. That gulf between number and intuition is where cosmic understanding begins. It demands imagination, the rare capacity to stretch mental space beyond lived space. Understanding distances you think you understand becomes a rehearsal for distances you cannot. When you recognize that your sense of space is bound to time and experience, you begin to dismantle its illusion. You realize that when you look at the night sky, you are peering across distances larger than minds evolved to handle. You begin to grow a new sense, a cognitive spatial sense that does not rely on movement but on abstraction. This is critical because cosmic scale forces humans into their second evolutionary stage, beyond biological limits and into intellectual adaptability. We learned to walk because legs carried bodies. We learned mathematics because nothing else could carry comprehension. The distances you think you understand, Earth's size, Moon's orbit, Sun's separation are the stepping stones for learning that space is not interpretable through instinct. Once this sinks in, you are ready for the deeper shock. The cosmos does not scale with your imagination. Your imagination must scale with the cosmos, and that, ultimately, is why we confront distance at all. Not to measure it, but to be transformed by it. By realizing how little we comprehend, we position ourselves to comprehend more. Universes do not shrink to fit the mind must stretch to meet the universe. Every kilometer beyond intuition is a call to evolve mentally. Every astronomical number is an invitation to humility. Every light year is a demand that we develop a second kind of sight-seeing that does not require touching. When you internalize this, the distances you thought you knew collapse, and new ones emerge vast, unsettling, magnificent. That collapse is not failure, it is awakening. Despite everything we have uncovered so far, despite creeping towards scales that strain intuition, Earth remains the last safe territory where human imagination still holds its footing. You can close your eyes and picture the globe spinning. You can imagine its continents, its oceans, its curvature seen through photographs from orbit. Earth is vast by biological standards, but mercifully finite. You can circle it, map it, visualize it. Our minds, though stretched, do not snap. This is why Earth plays such a critical role in cosmic storytelling. It is the largest object the average human can relate to. A city disappears beyond view in seconds. A nation fits into your mental atlas. But a planet, a whole world, is a boundary object between comprehension and collapse. It is the training ground of cosmic scale. We can walk its surface, sail its oceans, fly above its clouds, stand atop mountains and feel the horizon arc away. Space-age images anchor its shape. The famous blue marble photographs snapped by Apollo astronauts gave humanity its most important mirror proof that the planet is round. Framed in blackness, fragile yet whole. For many, that single image detonated awareness. That is our world. That is everything. That is home. Because we contain first-hand and second-hand experience of Earth, it remains measurable. 40,000 kilometers around the equator still sounds extraordinary, but it is not unimaginable. Humans circled it centuries ago. Modern planes encircle it in under 2 days. Satellites draw tight loops around it dozens of times per day. Earth's magnitude sits within narrative reach. If the brain had evolved anywhere else on Jupiter, on Mars perhaps, that planet would be its upper limit. But here, Earth became the ruler against which larger scales are judged. We refer to distances in planetary units, so many Earth diameters, so many times around Earth's circumference. Earth is the last familiar yardstick before things break. And yet, here lies the irony. A planet that seems enormous from the surface becomes trivial when seen from space. Look at Earth from the International Space Station. Continents shrink into patches. Oceans flatten into color washes. Storms become spirals the size of fingerprints. Look farther from lunar orbit and Earth becomes a small marble suspended in nothing. Push farther still from Mars and Earth becomes a star-like point, not even deserving of attention unless you know where to look. Voyager 1, looking back from billions of kilometers away, revealed Earth as a pixel less than a tenth of a pixel wide. The pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan named it. Earth is both incomprehensibly large and pathetically small, depending on where you stand. This dual identity is vital. It is what prepares the human mind for the cosmic shock to come. On the ground, Earth feels endless. Oceans are deep. Mountains are formidable. Deserts stretch beyond view. Your senses say, this world is huge. Even circumnavigation does not erase this impression. It merely reassigns scale. Pilots fly 9,000 meters above oceans that still feel immense below. Astronauts orbit at 400 kilometers up, still inside Earth's atmospheric halo, and watch continents pass like islands on a conveyor belt. Their perspective is the most dangerous. Height without abstraction. Immersion without full detachment. They see Earth as finite, yet complete a whole object. Almost touchable, but they are still close. They are still inside the sphere of familiarity. Earth offers a stable footing precisely because it is big enough to challenge, but small enough to tame. We can hold it in language. In physics, in maps, a schoolchild can draw it. A pilot can calculate flight time across it. A satellite can survey it. The human mind triumphed over Earth by translating it into geometry, into curvature, into coordinates. This translation produced a false sense of victory over scale, and that false sense is what will be shattered next. Earth feels intuitive because its dimensions can be domesticated by experience. Its 742-kilometer diameter is tangible only because we shrink it to a globe, a projection, or a blue sphere hanging in a museum. We abstract its size into page and screen. The real planet, the world you stand on, cannot be grasped directly. It must be miniaturized to be understood. Yet the more we compress it, the more we forget its true scale. A globe in your hand removes 999% of the magnitude, and with it, the awe. This is the cognitive trap. We believe we understand Earth because we have maps and photographs of it. But understanding a representation is not the same as understanding the entity itself. You cannot walk the equator. You cannot climb the whole of Earth. You cannot see all of it at once without leaving it. Our comprehension hinges on metaphors and models, not contact. Still, Earth works as the last rung on the perceptual ladder. It is where narrative and number remain coupled. Earth can be described, traversed, conquered in story, if not in totality. Its existence as a knowable whole gives the mind confidence. That confidence will fail in a moment, because Earth is where your intuition reaches its boundary. Once you leave it, once you step beyond lunar orbit, your instincts die. All calibration vanishes. At 1,000,000 kilometers, Earth is a dot. At 100 million, it is grain dust. At 1 billion, it is invisible without instruments. Earth remains comprehensible only because we are chained to it. The moment you observe it from elsewhere, it slips out of imagination. It becomes scenery, then a pixel, then a coordinate, and yet, precisely because it is the last familiar object of enormous size, Earth becomes the launching pad for cosmic thought. Without Earth as a reference, without knowing what a planet looks like from space, the mind's collapse would be instantaneous. Earth tempers the shock just barely. That is why Earth matters in a discussion about light years, because Earth is the final anchor before the abyss. If you cannot internalize Earth's scale, you cannot internalize the distances between stars. If you cannot hold Earth mentally, you have no hope of holding a light year. Earth is the biggest thing your intuition ever truly meets, yet it is nothing compared to what awaits. From this shrinking blue world, we look outward. It is here, at the edge of familiarity, that the universe begins to expand beyond reach. Earth fits in the mind, but only as a reduced version of itself. And even that limited comprehension must now be surrendered, because beyond Earth lies distance with no narrative and scales that consume metaphor itself. Earth may fit comfortably inside the mind, but the moment we step away from it, fractures appear. The first break in intuition happens surprisingly close, just beyond the sky. The moon, hanging gently over every ocean and city, is our nearest neighbor. We see it almost every night. We reference it in poetry, mythology, calendars. It feels intimate, a reflective lantern in familiar orbit. Yet the number that defines its distance silently undermines this sentiment: 384. 000 kilometers. At first glance, the figure sits innocently alongside Earth-sized numbers. But something unusual happens the moment you try to imagine it directly. Your mind reaches for metaphor and fails. 384. 000 kilometers is not something you can walk, or drive, or even mentally stretch across terrain. It has no experiential analog. You rescue yourself with substitution 3 days by spacecraft, but that is not understanding the distance. It is letting time mask space again. Here is where cognitive rupture shows itself. Let's test imagination. If you could string highways through space and drive a car at 100 kilometers per hour without stopping, reaching the moon would take 160 days, nearly half a year of non-stop motion. The brain tries to compress that into a calendar and shrugs. It still cannot feel 160 days in emptiness. The mind quietly rebels. It demands substance, scenery, interruption, landscape. But space has none. Strip movement from this number, and its naked absurdity emerges. 384. 000 kilometers of nothing. No air, no terrain, no horizon line shifting. Just a separation so inhospitable to intuition that abstraction must intervene. Everything evolution prepared you for collapses here. Humans navigate distances through smell, sound, muscle strain, environmental change. None apply between Earth and Moon. It is a desert without surface. This is why the Moon becomes the first psychological cliff. Not because it is far, but because the distance cannot be pictured. You can look at the Moon. You can see its cratered texture, yet you cannot imagine, in any first-hand way, the space between it and Earth. This distance is modest by cosmic terms, a rounding error. A pocket change measurement, but it breaks instinct. 384. 000 kilometers is the graveyard of intuition. Consider the Apollo missions. We think of them as heroic journeys to a nearby world. And they were. But what most people forget is that astronauts spent most of their journey traveling through nothing. There were no sights except Earth shrinking behind them and the Moon slowly growing, but even that growth was too slow to feel. There is no sense of motion in space, no wind, no ground, no background, only numbers on a cockpit readout. To truly understand the Moon's distance, you would need to suspend yourself between worlds and realize that movement has become invisible. This breaks the brain because humans associate distance with feeling. The Moon gives us distance without sensation. Streams of numbers can show how intimidating it is. You could line up 30 Earths between Earth and Moon with space to spare. Humanity's orbital highways sit only 400 kilometers up a rounding error compared to 384 Ross. 0 kilometers. Every step life has taken into space so far, satellites put is. Space tourism hovers inside 0.1% of the Earth-Moon gap. We live inside a cosmic basement, mistaking it for space. The Moon is close enough that we fantasize about reaching it, yet far enough that our bodies never truly will again, at scale. It is the first mirror held up to our intellectual arrogance. It whispers, "You thought you understood distance. You don't." Begezes. Perhaps the most striking contradiction is this. Every child has gazed at the Moon. Many have reached out their hands as if to touch it. The brain lies and compresses it, appears thumb-sized against the sky. But perspective is illusion. Raise your finger to blot it out, and you delete something 474 kilometers wide, large enough to engulf continents. The moon is not small. Your vantage point is, this is cognitive betrayal. The senses insist the moon is near. The numbers insist it is unreachable. Thus begins the split between perception and reality, the defining feature of cosmic comprehension. And once this fracture appears, consequences unfold. If something you can see is impossibly far, how much farther must be the things you cannot? This is the pivot where astronomy becomes psychological. Understanding the moon's distance is not about memorizing 384, 0 kilometers. It is about confronting the limits of visualization, accepting that your mind cannot bridge space directly, only symbolically. The moon became humanity's first experiment in abstraction. To reach it, we needed mathematics, propulsion, patience, and instruments because intuition offered no map. Apollo engineers did not feel their way there. They calculated their way there. This marked a turning point. Comprehension shifted from instinct to mathematics. The moon forced humans to do something unprecedented, trust equations more than senses. From this, an unspoken realization emerged. If something as visible as the moon requires abstraction, then the universe is not designed for human cognition. The moon is the smallest cosmic challenge humanity faces, and yet it already breaks intuition. The distances beyond it are not harder, they are impossible without mental reinvention. The moon is our warning sign, the first crack in the perceptual dome. Look again at its distance, 384, 0 kilometers, and consider how casually we speak about it. We mention it in textbooks as if narrating a stroll. But in reality, no human alive can imagine this separation. We visualize destinations, not voids. This is why the moon is such a profound teacher. It introduces the first rule of cosmic scale. You do not understand distance. You approximate it with metaphor. Once this sinks in, something remarkable happens. The moon ceases to be a destination and becomes a threshold, the border between Earth-sized thinking and cosmic-sized thinking. The moon is near enough to tempt imagination, yet far enough to murder it. Understanding this distance marks the beginning of cognitive evolution. The mind must abandon biology and adopt abstraction, or it remains imprisoned in provincial intuition. The moon is the first invitation to think beyond instinct, and the first proof that instinct alone is useless. The moon shattered instinct. Apollo made it undeniable. For thousands of years, humanity stared upward and imagined the moon as reachable only through myth ladders of gods, spirit journeys, legends of transcendent heroes. Then one day, ordinary primates built machines of metal and fire, sat inside them, and left the planet. They crossed a separation intuition could not picture. It is tempting to romanticize Apollo. But Apollo was not about flag planting or Cold War spectacle. Apollo was a human confrontation with scale. Its most shocking number is not how far the moon is, but how fast we had to travel to make the journey happen. 39. 600 kilometers per hour. Pause with that number. If you could drive your car at highway speeds to the moon, you would need almost 6 months of continuous motion. Yet Apollo did it in roughly 72 hours. This is the first lesson Apollo forced into consciousness. Intuition does not scale. Physics scales. Instinct tells you nothing travels that fast. Instinct imagines aircraft as the upper limit, 900 kilometers per hour, 1,000 at most. Apollo was moving 40 times faster than a jetliner, and still space swallowed that velocity whole. Even at 39, 600 kilometers per hour, the void between Earth and Moon remained 3 days wide. 3 days, that is a human-sized number. We can hold 3 days in memory. A weekend, a long wait, a hospital stay, the length of a shift rotation. This substitution rescued comprehension. Instead of imagining the emptiness, we imagine the duration again, distance masked by time. But Apollo, unlike our imaginations, encountered the actual separation. As the spacecraft left Earth, speed climbed 11 kilometers per second, yet outside the window. Nothing changed. No wind, no thundering sensation, no whipping landscape. Space offers no feedback. Velocity becomes invisible. This invisibility is existential. It means movement ceases to be something you feel. It becomes something you calculate. Apollo astronauts were hurtling outward faster than any human before them, yet their intuition could not reflect that fact. The computer told them they were moving. The numbers said reality had shifted. Instinct did not. This is the cognitive wound Apollo inflicts. Speed something, evolution built us to sense becomes abstraction. That 3-day journey is a psychological experiment disguised as a mission. Inside the capsule, the moon approaches with agonizing slowness. The Earth shrinks behind them. Through the tiny windows, nothing seems to move. It is a lesson in the powerlessness of senses. Without instruments, the mind is blind. Apollo did more than reach the moon, it humiliated instinct. The astronauts experienced the void between worlds physically, not as metaphor, not as diagram, but as lived awareness. 3 days suspended over nothing. No air resistance. No trajectory that could be felt. Only numerical readouts approximating reality. Apollo demonstrated that distances beyond Earth are not navigated by perception but by mathematics. When Apollo 11 fired its engines toward the moon, it crossed a conceptual boundary. Its journey was not guided by what humans could imagine, but by what equations could predict. Newton, not intuition, was the captain, and here lies the elegance of the event. Apollo did not shrink the moon, it shrank confidence. Every person who watched the Saturn V rise understood instinctively that something unprecedented was happening, not because of the spectacle, but because of what it implied. The human mind can go where the human brain cannot follow. 3 days, that is the number schools teach. But for astronauts, those 3 days were proof of a much deeper truth. The distance to the moon is not a journey. It is an intellectual construction. The spacecraft navigated gravitational gradients and inertial frames far outside human instinct. Apollo was an experiment in outsourcing cognition from body to mathematics, from sensation to computation. If you had placed ancient explorers on that spacecraft, their minds would not have understood where they were. They would see Earth receding, moon swelling, but the space between would remain incomprehensible. Apollo is where humanity learned that instinct cannot be trusted beyond the atmosphere. Apollo also exposed a hidden irony. Even when traveling faster than anything ever built, you barely begin to scratch the scale of space. At 39,600 kilometers per hour, Apollo covered less than 1 light second every hour. In cosmic terms, it crawled, yet from the perspective of biology, it might as well have been teleportation. This contrast, crawling in physics while vaulting in instinct, is what made Apollo transformative. Beyond the math and engines, Apollo changed how humans think. It destroyed parochialism. When astronauts saw Earth fade into a disk, their identities changed. The planet, once infinite, was now a sphere, small enough to cover with their thumb. Boundaries dissolved. Nations disappeared. Life compressed into fragility. Apollo's 3 days were not travel, they were perspective surgery. No human came back with the same mental model of scale. One astronaut described it succinctly. It felt like the Earth was something you could misplace. 2. This statement is not poetic exaggeration, it is perceptual collapse. The biggest world you know became something you could lose track of. That is the power of moving 384,000 kilometers away. Apollo did not expand space, it revealed how small our world always was. And here is the most devastating insight the mission produced. If 384,000 kilometers breaks intuition, what hope do we have for 150 million? Or 40 trillion. Apollo is not remarkable because it reached the moon, but because it exposed how unprepared the brain is for cosmic scale. The spacecraft returned humans alive. But it also returned a message. Understanding space requires abandoning instinct. The moon, reached in 3 days at unimaginable speed, is the first test, and we only barely passed it. Beyond it lies scale that will tear intuition apart unless we learn to think differently. Apollo was humanity's first rehearsal for the incomprehensible. It forced us to admit that velocity can be invisible, distance can be meaningless. The universe is not built for minds shaped by grasslands. We did not conquer distance, we surrendered to abstraction, and that surrender is what allows the next leap from 384,000 kilometers to 150 million, where even the illusion of movement collapses. The moon strained intuition. The sun annihilates it. If the moon was the threshold at which instinct began to wobble, the sun is where instinct collapses entirely. The familiar star that warms your skin, rises every morning, lights oceans and forests, and governs the rhythm of your day, is not up there. It is 150 million kilometers away. Say it slowly, 150 million kilometers. This number rolls easily off the tongue because language can hide terror. But the mind, if it tries to picture it honestly, falters. Here, abstraction becomes not a supplement, but a survival mechanism. Because if 3 days to the moon required a conceptual stretch, then 8 minutes of sunlight from the sun demands total reconfiguration of thought. Light, the fastest thing that exists, the cosmic sprinter that defines speed itself, takes over 480 seconds to arrive at Earth. A spacecraft like Apollo, moving at 600 kilometers per hour, would need 5 months of continuous motion. Suddenly, the space between us and the sun is not far. It is inhuman. Nothing in human life prepares you for 150 million kilometers. There is no narrative attachment point, no crossing, no experience, no metaphor. Even the word million blurs instinct, because instinct evolved to count berries and footprints, not astronomical voids. Once again, your brain tries to rescue itself through substitution. 8 minutes. Light travel time. 5 months by spacecraft. 93 million miles. But these substitutions are evasions. They are emotional anesthesia. They do not give you access to the distance, they replace it with familiarity. This is the sun's effect on cognition. It forces the realization that numbers at this scale are not just large, they are discontinuous with human perception. Imagine the Earth-Moon distance as a bead glued onto a wire. Now stretch that wire 18 meters more, and the sun sits at the end. The moon collapses into irrelevance. Everything humans have physically touched, satellites, stations, missions, shrinks to a microscopic proximity. Earth's orbit radius is the first number truly beyond intuition. Not because it is the largest we've seen, but because its structure resists narrative substitution. You cannot imagine driving across it. You cannot assign a human travel time without absurdity. You cannot scale it to familiarity, because no scaling retains integrity. Even model systems betray us. We compress the Earth-Sun distance into a classroom or solar system walkway. We make the sun a grapefruit and Earth a peppercorn 10 meters away. But we forget something crucial. All scales below this one are lies of convenience. The compressed model lets the mind cheat. It stands in awe at a walkable version of reality. But it forgets that the 10-meter gap represents a nothingness wider than all human experience. The sun is where distance becomes metaphysical. 150 million kilometers is not simply separation, it is cosmic insulation. Life exists because space is this large. If the sun were closer or farther by a few percent, ecosystems unravel. Distance becomes not a measurement but a condition for existence, a precarious truth that evolved minds cannot instinctively feel. Let's test the brain empirically. If you traveled 0 kilometers per day, you would reach the sun in 410 years. If the fastest human-made object, the Parker Solar Probe, were aimed at Earth instead of the sun, it would still take 7 months to traverse the gap, and it moves faster than Earth's orbital speed. Even at extreme velocity, the distance remains stubbornly irrational. Here, mathematics becomes the only interface left. We use astronomical units, AU, to distance ourselves from discomfort. We name 150 million kilometers 1 AU, as if renaming it tames it. This is cognitive sedation disguised as measurement. Humans preserve sanity through abstraction. Why does this matter? Because confronting the sun's distance forces a realization more significant than any number. The universe is not scaled for human comprehension. Our sensory system evolved in a world measured by body length, visibility range, and migration routes. Space operates in scales evolution had no reason to equip us for. Biology is provincial. Physics is imperial. The Earth-Sun distance introduces a new psychological barrier. Movement ceases to bridge understanding. The spacecraft analogy that saved you with the moon now fails. When even extreme motion is swallowed by emptiness, imagination collapses. This is the transition point. The mind can no longer pretend distance is an extension of experience. It must accept that distance is a mathematical reality independent of intuition. The shock intensifies when you realize this is the nearest star, the closest fusion furnace in a galaxy of hundreds of billions. If your mind fractures at 150 million kilometers, what hope survives for trillions? This is where cosmic thinking emerges. Earth orbit becomes the womb of awareness. The moon becomes the first contraction. The sun is birth painful and irreversible. From here onward, You cannot return to instinct. You must think in symbols, ratios, functions, and light travel time because nothing else works. Perhaps the most unsettling transformation is emotional. When you internalize 150 million kilometers real, not rhetorical, the sun stops being a warm comfort and becomes an abyss, a roaring furnace so remote that the silence between you and it is eerie. You understand why sunlight feels instant because the brain lies. It cannot perceive 8 minutes. It perceives illumination. Perception edits physics. Once the illusion is removed, sunlight becomes a message from the past, an artifact from a star, as it was 480 seconds ago. Every sunrise is delayed reality, not present experience. This transforms the sun from unthinking object into time mechanism, and this redefinition is crucial. Distance is inseparable from time. The Earth-Sun gap is large not because kilometers pile up, but because the speed of causality itself has limits. You begin to realize why light speed matters, why relativity matters, why physics is less a description of reality than a confession. Reality outruns intuition. At 150 million kilometers, humanity stops pretending it understands the universe by looking at it. Scale becomes adversarial. Numbers become philosophical. Comprehension becomes engineered. The sun teaches a brutal lesson. If you cannot fathom 150 million kilometers, you are unprepared to ask what lies beyond. This is why astronomy is not about telescopes, it is about surrender. The sun forces the mind to relinquish the belief that experience is universal. The distance to the sun is the threshold where instinct resigns and intellect takes command. Standing here, we are ready for the real confrontation stars. Light years, galaxies, realms where 150 million kilometers disappears into numerical dust. The sun is the first abyss. But beyond it lies infinity that does not care you exist. When humans first left Earth, there was quiet confidence that speed was a solvable problem. From horses to steam engines, jets to rockets. Mechanical history suggests a narrative. We always go faster. 1 century gives us carriages. The next supersonic fighters. We imagine this curve to be endless, as if velocity were a ladder we simply climb. Cosmic distance shatters that illusion. If you place humanity's fastest achievements before the scale of space, their significance collapses. Our triumphs become toys. The speed records we celebrate Mach numbers, booster burn rates. Ballistic limits are exposed as provincial realities suited for a planetary sandbox, the fastest spacecraft ever built. NASA's Parker Solar Probe travels faster than any object humanity has ever launched, approximately 700 kilometers per hour at peak, a speed so absurd relative to terrestrial motion that it breaks intuition. Yet even at this velocity, the Sun-Earth distance remains 7 months wide. 7 months. With the most extreme engineering in our species' history, optimized trajectories, gravitational slingshots, hell-hot solar flybys, the machine does not punch through space. It crawls. The void absorbs velocity as if it were nothing. Here lies the contradiction that humbles us. Speed explodes, yet travel time barely shrinks. This is the first serious confrontation with cosmic reality. It does not matter how fast you go. Space is too big. Apollo's speed, 600 kilometers per hour, felt staggering until Parker Solar Probe made it microscopic. Yet at solar scale, both are equally slow, not practically slow, physically insignificant. At this moment, an awakening begins. Velocity is not the key to space. Scale is. Speed is not mastery, it is inadequacy exposed. The Parker Probe's journey illustrates this perfectly. At its peak, it travels at 200 kilometers per second. But if it aimed for Alpha Centauri, the nearest star, it would need 19,000 years to arrive. A soldier born today could start a civilization around that ship rise, flourish, collapse hundreds of times before the probe reached its destination. The universe is not a terrain you cross. It is a medium in which motion is nearly meaningless. This is why the concept of a light year matters. Light is the only thing fast enough to make cosmic distances traversable. Yet even light, the cosmic speed limit, gives distances in years. Not seconds, not hours, not even days, years. When humans build a craft that approaches a fraction of that limit, It is celebrated in headlines. Yet from the perspective of physics, it is placed gently on the cosmic floor and forgotten. We are speed children trying to operate in a distance universe. This realization terrorizes optimism but births insight. The limitation is not weakness, it is revelation. The structure of space-time itself denies the fantasy of reachable everything. The universe enforces delay. Speed does not conquer. It reveals your insignificance. Consider Voyager 1, the symbolic scout of humanity escaping the solar system at 61.0 kilometers per hour. A speed so monumental we had to rethink statistics to describe it. Yet it will need 40,000 years to drift near another star. Voyager is not traveling through space. It is decaying into memory. Our fastest probes suffer the same fate. They cannot cross meaningful cosmic terrain within any human time frame. Their achievements, while technologically magnificent, prove a paradox. We can build machines faster than intuition, but slower than reality. This is where cognitive shock returns. We are conditioned to believe progress is limitless, that faster is always someday achievable. We extrapolate from history wagons to jets to rockets, and imagine stars next. Space laughs at extrapolation. Acceleration runs into practical impossibility. Fuel mass, energy density, relativity, radiation, propulsion inefficiency, cosmic debris impact. Each becomes a wall. The faster you go, the harder the universe pushes back, so even our greatest speeds are swallowed. This forces a reframing. The universe is not empty. It is too large for travel to be a meaningful strategy. Cosmic exploration must shift from going there to thinking there. The spacecraft becomes the brain, not the body. Astronomy becomes intelligence, not locomotion. The telescope replaces travel. The model replaces migration. Even science fiction, the refuge where humans fantasize escape from limits, bends under physics. Warp drives, hyperspace, wormholes, all are narrative devices designed to bypass the humiliation delivered by cosmic scale. Fiction accelerates because nature refuses to. But this refusal should not be read as defeat. It is invitation to grow intellectually, not mechanically. Space compels us to abandon instinctual metaphors. Distance cannot be reduced to travel time. Movement is not the bridge understanding is. That is why astrophysics matters. It is the only discipline capable of navigating a universe that refuses motion. Mathematics becomes our engine. Theory becomes our vehicle. Imagination becomes our propulsion. Inquiry, not hardware, becomes the frontier. This is why the smallest astronomical fact destabilizes more than rockets ever could. Distance redefines potential. When even the fastest machines yield before space. Humility is no longer a virtue, it is necessity. Because if Parker Solar Probe, the champion of motion, is still crawling, what is the brain doing imagining star travel? We must evolve cognitively. You do not defeat cosmic distance. You surrender the fantasy and build a new paradigm. This shift is not defeatist, it is transcendental. Humans thought movement was mastery, but the universe reveals something deeper. Understanding is the only successful travel. We know galaxies because we cannot visit them. We measure exoplanets because no craft will land on them. We map black holes because falling into them is death. Knowledge, not motion, is our function. Even the fastest machines surrender, because machines obey space-time. Mind does not. The brain, abstracting beyond instinct, becomes the only system capable of spanning the universe. Data moves faster than rockets. Insight outruns engines. Prediction exceeds traversal. Speed caps out. Awareness does not. The surrender of machinery is the liberation of intelligence. When you internalize this, cosmic scale stops humiliating and starts ennobling. The fact that space absorbs our fastest ships without blinking is not evidence of helplessness. It is evidence that we must evolve beyond speed. Understanding is humanity's propulsion. The future of exploration is not flight, it is comprehension. Space does not ask you to arrive. It asks you to understand why you never will. At a certain point in cosmic exploration, a quiet but devastating realization arrives. Kilometers stop working. They do not fail mathematically, they fail psychologically. They are too small, too parochial, too anchored in experience. Kilometers work when distance means travel. They work when roads exist. They work when landscapes pass and bodies move. But the moment space expands beyond comprehension, the kilometer becomes a relic, a unit tied to instinct that no longer describes reality. You could express the sun's distance as 150 million kilometers, and people will nod. Yet no brain in the audience has felt a million anything. The number becomes a chant memorized, not internalized. Kilometers break here because they assume the mind can stack experience infinitely. It cannot. The collapse deepens beyond the sun. The nearest star after our own is more than 40 trillion kilometers away. At this point, the kilometer is not a measure, it is nonsense. The mind does not stretch, it shuts down. It is as if someone asked you to imagine drowning in 10,000 oceans. You can picture one, but not 10,000 layered together. Human perception hits overflow. This is why astronomy and physics perform an intellectual pivot. They abandon distance units derived from walking and adopt one derived from speed itself. Enter the light year. The kilometer failed not because it was inaccurate, but because it was anthropocentric. A kilometer describes Earth-like existence, footsteps, roads, journeys, commute times, airline charts. It presumes movement through contact. Space defies movement. There is nothing to cross, only emptiness. So the universe demands a metric based not on bodies traveling through terrain, but on the only thing capable of touching cosmic structure, light. Instead of asking, "How far is that?" we begin asking, "How long does light take to get there?" This is not linguistic decoration, it is conceptual rescue. Light is the only phenomenon that can outrun collapse of meaning. When distances are expressed in kilometers, comprehension dies. When distances are expressed in light travel time, comprehension awakens. 8 minutes to the sun, just over a second to the moon, 4 years to the nearest star. These are approachable not because the mind understands the magnitude, but because it understands delay. Time is familiar. We breathe durations. We age in durations. We think in durations. Thus, light years replace kilometers not merely for mathematical neatness, but because they align distance with human cognition. This is the turning point. Distance becomes not where something is, but when something is. Kilometers measure separation. Light years measure causality. In cosmic terms, the now you see is never now, it is archived light. The farther an object lies, the older its image. This reframes distance from spatial displacement to temporal displacement. Space itself becomes a time machine. This shift is not cosmetic, it is philosophical. It changes how humanity understands existence. When you say something is 10 light years away, you are saying, "We are watching how it looked 10 years ago." Camptobeson, say 500 light years. And you mean, we are seeing medieval light, starlight, that left when humanity had no telescopes. By 5, Brainsy, E5, say 10,000 light years. And you mean, we are receiving photons older than civilization. Vankigforting. Darmings on name. Darmings aloud. Suddenly space stops being distance and becomes history. Kilometers could never do this, they are mute. They cannot speak in meaning, they say only far. Without flavor, without implication, the light year, on the other hand, reveals. But the shift is even deeper. Kilometers crumble not just because they fail at magnitude, but because they fail at relevance. Imagine telling someone that a galaxy is 6 times 10, 17 kilometers away. That number is vast, precise, and worthless. Its precision is meaningless because no mind can convert it into impact. But say the galaxy is 65 million light years away, and suddenly comprehension tingles because the brain knows what 65 million years implies. That is extinction scale. That is deep time. Dinosaurs. Continental drift. Light years convert distance into narrative. The mind survives scale only by transforming it into story. Light years enable that conversion. Kilometers, in astronomy, are like syllables without language, technical but dead. Light years possess grammar. They integrate scale with significance. They connect conservation of space to the passage of time. They allow cosmic structure to be read rather than merely described. Even scientists, who could happily operate in kilometers, choose light years because knowledge must be communicable. A unit that fails to generate comprehension is not a unit, it is a barrier. Kilometers become a graveyard of meaning long before the universe reaches its true size. The irony is sharp. The unit named to represent Earth's size fails because Earth's size is irrelevant at cosmic scale. The universe demanded its own unit, one defined by its fastest messenger. The kilometer marks motion, the light year marks reality. Once this shift takes hold, everything changes. The night sky ceases to be scenery. It becomes temporal architecture. Stars cease to be dots. They become timestamps. You are not looking outward. You are looking backward. Kilometers could never teach this. The collapse of the kilometer is a cognitive liberation. It forces humanity to abandon instinct and adopt abstraction, the one tool capable of scaling beyond bodies. It does more than relabel space. It forces a psychological metamorphosis. To understand the universe, you must stop thinking like an animal and start thinking like a physicist. Kilometers belong to instinct. Light years belong to intellect. The universe is too vast for instinct to follow. It must be carried by mathematics and meaning. Thus, the failure of kilometers is not an inconvenience. It is a doorway into the realization that the universe is quantifiable, but only through units that respect the speed limit of reality. Kilometers measure footsteps. Light years measure existence. Humanity's greatest distances are not traveled. They are comprehended. Say the word light year aloud, and most people nod knowingly. They think it means a very long time. Storytellers misuse it constantly. That's light years ahead, or we're light years behind. Popular culture has quietly repurposed a scientific term into metaphor for progress. The tragedy is that this distortion obscures the most profound idea humans ever named. A light year is not time. It is distance expressed through time. It is how far light travels in 1 year, nothing more, nothing less. Yet, this definition barely scratches the true conceptual power buried inside the term. The misunderstanding persists because instinct refuses to accept that distance can be defined without movement. Our brains evolved to experience distance as physical traversal walks, journeys, drives, migrations. But light years have nothing to do with movement we perform. They describe movement we cannot perform. To redefine the light year properly, we must unhinge distance from the body and reattach it to causality. Light does not travel through space. Light reveals space. It illuminates geometry we cannot touch. It acts as messenger, not traveler. Thus, a light year is not a road. It is a delay. When you say something is 1 light year away, you are not saying, it is far. You are saying, we are seeing it as it was 1 year ago. The word year is not a convenience but the essence of meaning. A light year is measurement fused with memory. This overturns intuition. We tend to believe that reality is immediate, that what we see exists in the present. The light year kills that belief. Light is finite. Distance is backlog. Perception is archival. What you observe is never now. This is why redefining the light year matters. It is not merely scientific housekeeping, it is epistemological correction. If distances are described in light years, then everything the mind perceives is subject to time debt. The universe is not visible, only its past is. Misunderstanding the light year cheapens that revelation. Treating it as vague hyperbole, so far away, strips it of its intellectual violence. The light year is a statement about the limits of immediacy. It tells you not how much space lies between objects, but how much history separates you from what you see. Every star becomes a photograph with a timestamp. Every galaxy is a fossil in light. This is the true definition. A light year is the minimum delay between event and awareness. Redefining light years means redefining the act of seeing. It also means redefining the universe. We do not exist inside a spatial panorama, we exist inside a temporal archive. We occupy not space, but delayed awareness of space. When scientists say the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across, they are not merely describing size, they are describing epistemic imprisonment. No information can cross that space faster than 100,000 years. Reality is slow. Causation is slow. The universe cannot update faster than light. This makes the light year a measure of communication failure, a metric of ignorance that cannot be escaped. Only quantified. The light year is brutally honest. It says, you cannot know anything sooner than light is willing to bring it. That is why the common misunderstanding equating light years with vastness is dangerous. Vastness does not frighten instinct. Delay does. The light year frightens not because it is long, but because it enslaves information. Light years define the smallest unit of cosmic truth accessible to us. Where kilometers measure how far objects are separated, Light years measure how much past we are condemned to see. This is why physicists never speak in kilometers at large scales. Kilometers tell you nothing about knowledge. Light years tell you everything. They tell you how old the truth is before it reaches you. Redefining the light year means acknowledging that we live not in the present but under layers of expired realities. Starlight is ancient. Galactic light is prehistoric. Cosmic microwave background radiation is primeval. The light year does not measure distance. It measures the age of perception. This redefinition collapses another misconception motion. When someone asks how far a star is, they often assume static separation. But the star has moved. The Earth has moved. And the light you see left before either occupied their current positions. So the distance you speak of is not just spatial, it is historical distortion. Light years are fossilized sight. Even popular metaphors that use light years ahead distort meaning. They imply light years represent progress, but the truth is inverse. Light years represent delay. If something is 1,000 light years away, it is not ahead of you. It is behind you in time. Redefinition restores precision. A light year is not distance. It is the distance required to produce 1 year of ignorance. Astronomy becomes tragic when framed this way. Because every observation is heartbreak. You cannot know what is happening. You only know what happened. Redefining the light year gives everything in the sky a ghostly character. You are surrounded not by present objects but by light corpses, signals of worlds as they once were. Some may no longer exist. Some may have changed entirely. Some may be dead stars long collapsed. But their light is still en route, still convincing you they are alive. This is why redefining the light year is radical. It dissolves reality. It destroys naive seeing. It forces the mind to abandon the fantasy of immediacy and accept that knowledge itself is slow. Once you internalize this, you will never look at the night sky the same way. You will not see stars. You will see timestamps. You will see delayed truth. You will see distance not as space but as lost information. The light year stops being a cosmic footnote and becomes the most existentially violent concept science ever created. And because of that, redefining it is not pedantry, it is reawakening. The light year is the measurement of how far reality must travel before it reaches you. Once you understand that, all cosmic scale changes meaning. The universe stops being a place and becomes a conversation slowed by physics. Kilometers collapse. The light year replaces them, not as a number, but as a worldview. There is a number hidden beneath every equation in physics. A constant so fundamental that reality bends around it. 300,000 kilometers per second, the speed at which light travels through empty space. It is not fast, it is final. It is not merely velocity, it is boundary. The universe is not willing to let anything outrun it. Humans easily mistake this value as impressive. It is more than impressive, it is tyrannical. The speed of light dictates how the universe communicates, evolves, and reveals itself. It defines cause and effect. It determines the pace of knowledge. It is not one parameter among many, it is the speed limit of existence. Nothing, not rockets, not particles, not gravity waves can convey influence faster. Light speed is the maximum rate at which information can propagate. This transforms it from physical constant to epistemological prison. If light moved infinitely fast, you would see the universe in real time. You would observe distant stars as they are now, not as they were. You would know instantly if a supernova detonated across the galaxy. Reality would be present, not archived, but because light moves at a finite speed, the universe is delay-locked. It is stitched together not spatially but temporally. What you witness is always historical data. A star 500 light-years away. You are seeing an image older than your country's culture. A galaxy 30 million light-years distant. You are seeing the world when mammals had barely begun to diversify. The cosmic background radiation 8 billion light-years old. You're observing the echo of the universe learning to exist. People often misunderstand the phrase "nothing travels faster than light" as limitation. It is deeper, it is architecture. Without a speed limit, reality could not be causally coherent. Events separated by distance would lose sequence. Cause might not precede effect. The universe would not be intelligible. Light speed is the scaffold that makes physics possible. It also explains why our fastest machines lose meaning. No matter how clever engineering becomes, spacecraft remain insects crawling on a glacier. Parker Solar Probe's 700 0 kilometers per hour becomes irrelevant next to 300. 0 kilometers per second. Light covers Parker's 7-month journey in 8 minutes. This is why cosmic distances require new units. Kilometers are destroyed by speed scale. If something moves at 300, 0 kilometers per second, distance stops being space and becomes time. A light second, moon distance. A light minute, planetary scale. A light hour, solar system scale. A light year, stellar scale. A light century, interstellar migration. A million light years, galactic separation. The speed of light transforms geometry into chronology. Space is measured in seconds of light. Physics did not choose this, physics discovered it. Light speed is not fitted into equations. Equations were rewritten around it. Einstein did not decree this limit. He uncovered its tyranny. Relativity says light speed is invariant, whether you chase it or flee from it. It does not change. Nothing else in motion behaves like that. When a car approaches you, its speed relative to you can change, but not light. That immovability forces everything time. Space. Mass to adapt, time dilates. Mass increases. Length contracts, not for aesthetic reasons, but because reality must be consistent with light's absolute limit. Consider what this implies psychologically. You live in a universe where reality bends rather than allow anything to outrun information. The cosmos protects causality like sacred law. This is why the speed of light is misunderstood when treated as really fast. That phrasing trivializes the truth. It is not fast, it is the rulebook. Our world navigates beneath it. Your instincts are built in slow-motion physics walking speeds, sound speeds, airplane speeds. Everything you experience is tiny compared to the limit. The human brain evolved inside a universe where light speed is infinite relative to needs, because nothing in daily life presses against it. That is why comprehension breaks at cosmic scale. Evolution optimized cognition for surfaces, not space-time. We evolved to track prey, not photons. Yet despite this biological ill-fit, humans discovered the constant. They articulated it, measured it, tested it, and this discovery reshaped human identity. Once we knew the speed of light, we could no longer pretend that experience defined truth. Reality became mathematical, not intuitive. The mind, not the senses, became the only reliable cosmic instrument. Reality began speaking in light travel time. Astronomy stopped being about where and became about when. Physics stopped being about motion and became about limits. Cosmology stopped being myth and became measurement of delay. The speed of light even dictates the shape of the observable universe. There may be vastly more beyond, but light has not arrived yet, therefore it does not exist for us. Light speed defines visibility. It defines ignorance. It defines edge. The phrase observable universe is not poetic, it is literal. The distance light has traveled since the Big Bang defines the diameter of what we can know. Beyond that sphere, reality may continue, but causality has not delivered proof. Every telescope is a time machine, not by invention, but by compulsion, because the universe only speaks through delayed light. This is why redefining cosmic understanding requires bending thought around light speed rather than distance. You do not navigate the universe, you await its messages. When you internalize this, you stop asking naive questions like, why can't we reach another star? The answer is brutal. Because space was built with delay as law. Distance is just the visible face of ignorance. Instead, you begin asking, how does a mind grow to comprehend a universe that hides itself behind 300, 0 kilometers per second? This is the intellectual upgrade the speed of light demands. It trains humility, reminding you that physics is not designed around you, you are designed within it. In biological scale, light is infinite. In cosmic scale, it barely suffices. This is why cosmic structure looks enormous, not because it is vast, but because information is slow. The speed of light is not victory, it is constraint that made intelligence necessary. Life cannot outrun information. It must outthink it. Space will always win the race. But the mind, unconstrained by motion, becomes humanity's only vehicle. Light speed humbled rockets. It humbled intuition. It humbled ambition, but it liberated comprehension. It taught us that the universe is not a place we cross. It is a story we uncover in delay. If abstraction alone could educate, the universe would be easy to understand. But the mind does not grasp truth through numbers, it grasps truth through anchors. analogies, and narrative frames. So let us strip cosmic scale from its intangible throne and reattach it to something human. Begin with the speed of light, 300. 0 kilometers per second. The number is intellectually understood but emotionally inert. Translate it. If light were a car driving down a highway, it would circle the Earth 5 times in 1 second. That image jolts intuition. Earth, which once felt large, becomes scenery, passing like telephone poles at relativistic speed. It shrinks cognitively because you now sense how small it is relative to the universe's intrinsic standard. Next comparison. If the moon were 1 meter away, the sun would sit 3 football fields away. Suddenly 384. 0 kilometers becomes walkable, and 150 million km becomes almost absurdly distant. That distance, scaled into fields of grass and bleachers, makes the solar system visceral. This is the function of analogy. It stabs through abstraction. Here is another. Imagine the Earth with the size of a basketball. The moon would be a tennis ball orbiting 7 meters away down the hallway. But the sun? It would be a flaming sphere too, 5 kilometers away. This sparks the realization that the space between objects is far more dominant than the objects themselves. Reality is mostly empty distance. Matter is punctuation, not narrative. Still too abstract? Let's shrink further. If the Milky Way galaxy were the size of North America, the solar system would be a grain of dust, and Earth would be invisible. Smaller than bacteria on that grain, you begin to sense not just scale, but insignificance. Yet comparisons do more than humble, they instruct. Consider human travel time. If every second you walked represented 1,000 years of light travel, a brisk stroll from your house to the nearest cafe would take you nearly the entire age of the universe. Scale ruins confidence. The same technique applies to time delay. When you look at the sun, you are seeing sunlight that left 8 minutes ago, like watching a delayed broadcast. Now extend that. If your friend on the moon turned on a flashlight, you wouldn't see it for 28 seconds. If a civilization on a planet around Proxima Centauri sent us a message, we wouldn't receive it for 4 years, and our reply wouldn't reach them until 8 years later. Suddenly, communication becomes archaeology. Relationships become staggered echoes. Another analogy. Imagine watching a football game with a 10-year broadcast delay. You are cheering for plays that happened when you were in another job, another home, another identity. This is the universe, not live, but historical. Let's escalate the analogy using extinction. When you gaze at the Whirlpool galaxy 23 million light-years away, you are seeing light emit when early apes had just begun evolving. Grasping hands, your eyes are receiving the universe's Paleolithic postcards. This comparison exposes a psychological fracture. The sky is ancient, and your perception is a museum, not a window. You live surrounded by artifacts, not events. This leads to perhaps the most unsettling analogy. Imagine driving your car through a city, but every building you see is how it looked decades ago. Some have collapsed since. Some have been rebuilt. Some are gone entirely. You just don't know yet. This is astronomy. Reality is half ghost. Even closer examples reveal the break between truth and seeing. Lightning, you see, has already happened. Thunder arrives late because sound is slower. Solar flares erupt. Earth learns 8 minutes later. If the sun extinguished now, Earth would continue unaware, bright and warm for 8 minutes. This is not poetic metaphor. It is world structure. The universe does not inform, it reports. After delay. Let's push deeper. Consider cosmic scale compared to human lifespan. 1 light-year is 9.46 trillion kilometers. If you traveled at airplane speed, 900 kilometers per hour, it would take 2 million years to travel 1 light-year. Compare that to the entire history of Homo sapiens, about 300,000 years. A single light-year would outlive your species' existence 4-fold. Real-world analogy. Imagine promising to walk to a destination, but every generation of your descendants dies and is replaced 4 times before reaching the halfway point. This is why the kilometer collapses, not because it is inaccurate, but because it cannot carry meaning. Analogy rehabilitates comprehension. Now try comprehension's final test. If the sun were a coin in New York, Alpha Centauri would be another coin in Los Angeles. That is the nearest star. The universe is not crowded, it is sparse. Cosmic emptiness is not metaphor, it is infrastructure. The Milky Way becomes a strange city. Stars are houses separated not by streets but by continents. Understanding distances through raw values fails. Understanding through analogy succeeds, but at a cost. Analogies reveal that the universe is not dramatic, it is indifferent. One more comparison that strikes deeper. If humanity detected alien life 1,000 light-years away, our reply, even with perfect technology, would not be delivered until the year 3025, and their answer would arrive in 4025. Diplomacy becomes archaeology. Contact becomes legacy. Analogy reveals the tragedy of distance. Yet analogy also nurtures awe. It transforms sterile numbers into shockwaves. It forces humility not by preaching, but by scaling. The universe is too large for instinct, so we tame it with metaphor, model, simulation. But every comparison, however useful, carries a sting. It reminds you that the universe is not sized for you. You are sized for a planet. Analogy lifts you out of that provinciality, but never lets you forget your place. When you internalize these comparisons, you begin to realize something profound. The universe is incomprehensible, and yet you comprehend that it is incomprehensible. This is intellect at war with evolution and winning. The mind cannot reach the stars, but understanding can. That is why real-world comparisons matter. They are not gimmicks, they are prosthetics. They help the brain step beyond its architecture. Analogy is not simplification, it is transcendence. Human beings instinctively evaluate distance through mobility. If you can drive it, fly it, sail it, or walk it, you understand it. That is why cosmic distance fractures human intuition, nothing we use to measure life planes. Highways. Ocean route survives contact with astronomical scale. So let us do something radical. Let us weaponize the familiar aviation. Automotive travel, maritime navigation, and let them fail in front of you. Start with the fastest commercial experience you know, flying. A transcontinental flight New York to Los Angeles takes about 5 hours. The Earth's circumference, if flown in one connected loop, is roughly 45 hours of flight time when you include refueling and routing. So airplanes shrink the world into something you can traverse in 2 days. You can have breakfast in London, dinner in Dubai, but the moment you leave the atmosphere, flight collapses as a metaphor. If a commercial jet tried flying to the moon 384, 0 kilometers, its engines would run for 17 days straight, and that's with no atmosphere to breathe. No fuel depots, no emergency landing strip, no glide path if systems fail, just black vacuum. Already, flight, humanity's fastest common tool, feels obsolete. Let's push harder. Use the Apollo spacecraft 39, 600 kilometers per hour, a speed 400x faster than your highway drive. Even at this extraordinary velocity, the moon took 3 days. So imagine driving across the city and arriving 3 days later. This is the scale break, the cognitive snap, where intuition disconnects. Now reach upward. Earth to Sun, 150 million kilometers. If a jetliner headed for the Sun at 900 kilometers per hour, the trip would take 19 years of continuous flight, 20 years in an airplane seat, circling the Earth 410 times without landing. That is not travel, it is punishment. Even at Apollo's speed, the Sun requires 5 months of relentless motion. If a ship attempted it, even a nuclear-powered icebreaker, you could live your entire life aboard and never arrive. And suddenly the universe does not feel merely big, it feels adversarial. The automobile collapses even faster. At highway speeds 100 kilometers per hour, a drive to the Sun takes 171 years. Imagine loading your car with snacks and fuel, and your great-great-great-grandchildren being the ones who pull into solar orbit. Distance becomes inheritance rather than itinerary. Now examine sea travel, the first human experience of the infinite. Early sailors crossing the Atlantic needed 30-60 days. They believed that crossing the horizon meant facing monsters or falling into void. Space is worse. If Earth and Moon were 2 ports, the journey between them is not a month, but 3 relentless, engine-burning days at extreme thrust, and from Earth to the Sun, space becomes an ocean. 4,000 times wider than the Atlantic. The great explorers of history, Magellan, Cook, Zheng He, become metaphors that break. Their daring journeys, once the definition of human scale, are reduced to footpaths in a cosmic desert. Let's scale up the failure. The fastest aircraft humans ever flew, the SR-71 Blackbird, at 3,500 kilometers per hour, would need 9 years to reach the moon, and 900 years to reach the sun. That is older than written civilization. Instead of arriving in orbit, your descendants would arrive carrying myth. And take the Parker Solar Probe, 192 kilometers per second, the fastest object we have ever built. Relative to airplanes, it travels 640 times faster. And yet, at that speed, traversing the sun's distance still takes months. Now return to the everyday world. Drive across your country 6 hours, maybe a day or two. Fly between continents, a few movies, and a nap. But for the cosmos, speed is humiliation. Every mode of travel you trust becomes a parody of progress. Cars are crawling. Planes are crawling. The fastest spacecraft ever built are crawling. Distance exposes technology's smallness. Motion, the thing evolution rewarded, is revealed to be nearly useless off the planet. And here is the psychological break. For your entire life, speed has been synonymous with possibility. You drive to reach stores. You fly to reach nations. You sail to reach continents. But the universe does not reward speed. It mocks it. Space is so large that even the fastest human achievements dissolve into irrelevance. This creates a deep cognitive wound. Your internal sense of scale is a biological hallucination. What you call far is nothing. Let's illustrate it differently. Imagine Earth compressed to a map pinned on your wall. Every city, every ocean, every airplane route is drawn in ink. Now take a flashlight, light itself, and in 1 second, sweep it across the entire globe. Light touches everything before you blink. Now enlarge that map to include the solar system. Sweep again, the beam barely makes it to the moon and back. Enlarge the map to the nearest stars. Now your flashlight beam takes years to cross it. Suddenly the fastest thing in the universe becomes slow, not because light changed, but because the canvas did. This is the revelation. The universe does not scale down to you. Everything you use to understand distance collapses. Cars are metaphors until they fail. Planes are metaphors until they expire. Ships are metaphors until they drown in emptiness. Even rockets, the most dramatic symbol of modern capability, become footnotes when measured against light. This breaking of familiarity is essential. Without it, light years remain trivia, words spoken without comprehension. By forcing automobiles, aircraft, and ships to fail in front of you, the universe becomes honest. You stop imagining travel as movement. You begin seeing it as impossibility. And when transportation collapses as metaphor, one truth emerges. Space is not a frontier. It is a barrier, not because of danger, but because of distance. And understanding that is the first step toward grasping why the light year exists, not as a convenience, but as a survival tool for the mind. We need the light year, not because we measure far things, but because our intuition must be dismantled before it can be rebuilt. Speed, in space, is not progress. It is insignificance measured. Light feels instantaneous because nothing in daily life challenges its speed. But once you step into cosmic scale, that illusion collapses. The sunlight hitting your face is 8 minutes old, meaning the sun could disappear and Earth would carry on, unaware. For a final golden 8-minute afterglow, civilization, instinct, and intuition all operate as if causality is immediate. The universe quietly proves otherwise. The moon, the nearest body, is still far enough away that Apollo astronauts spoke in delayed echoes. 3 seconds between messages. Conversations floated in uncertainty, forcing patience. Mars stretches that delay to absurdity between 2 and 22 light minutes, depending on orbit. A command sent from Earth becomes antique by the time it arrives. If a rover reaches danger, it must save itself, because human reaction comes nearly an hour too late. Space forces autonomy not because we want it, but because physics offers no alternative. Move outward, and the delays inflate mercilessly. Saturn sits over 1 light hour away. Cassini's images were always history. Never now. Voyager 1, racing at 17 kilometers per second for nearly 50 years, has barely crossed the boundary of 1 light day. The entire span of human civilization, agriculture, writing, empires, philosophy fits inside 1 day of light travel. This is where the mind begins to fracture. Effort means nothing against delay. Then comes the light year 9. 46 trillion kilometers of waiting. Proxima Centauri, our nearest stellar neighbor, is 4 years distant in information time. The glow you see tonight began when your world was different, leaders changed, people aged. Your own past self made choices forgotten now. Every star is a time capsule, not a lamp. Vega shines with photons older than your lifetime. Betelgeuse is deeper still. Its reddish flicker began when Leonardo da Vinci had not yet been born. That star may already be gone, its demise still encrypted in flight. The universe lies to you, not maliciously, but structurally it cannot update fast enough. The Andromeda Galaxy is the most majestic insult to immediacy. The faint light you see originated 5 million years ago, when early humans first shaped tools. Your eyes do not show you reality, they show archaeology. The sky is not a window, it is a museum of delayed truths. Beyond the visible, matters worsen. Some galaxies accelerate away faster than light can outrun expansion. Their signals will never reach us. They exist outside our causality, not absent, but unreachable. The observable universe is not everything, but simply everything light has had time to deliver. Velevens abradely, most free, even communication inherits this structure. Speak to a civilization 100 light-years away, and they receive your words long after you are gone. Responding requires patience that spans generations. Diplomacy becomes heritage. The universe enforces waiting. And in that waiting, humility grows. This delay reshapes identity. We are not observers of the universe. We are interpreters of expired information. Instruments do not give us the present. They give us ancient reports. Yet the remarkable twist is that we understand this. We decode delay, reconstruct reality, infer the invisible, and predict what the photons have not yet confirmed. Physical travel loses. Mental comprehension wins. The cosmos buries truth behind the finite speed of light. But somehow humanity excavates it. Telescopes become time machines. Equations become shovels. Insight outruns photons. The delay exists, yet knowledge leaps beyond it. That is our advantage. We transcend slowness through understanding. You do not see the universe as it is, but you know enough to correct for that fact. The night sky becomes tragic, magnificent, and meaningful once you grasp that every star is a memory, every galaxy a fossil. We live surrounded by the past, and yet we keep discovering the present hidden behind it. There was a time when humanity believed sight was immediate, that the universe revealed itself instantaneously, without delay. Philosophers assumed vision worked like touch, direct, immediate, unquestionable. The stars appeared steady, distant but present. Their light assumed to exist at the same moment as observation. For thousands of years, no one imagined reality might arrive late. Only when science began interrogating the sky did this illusion tear. The first cracks came in the 17th century when Danish astronomer Ole Rømer studied Jupiter's moon Io. He noticed something strange. Its eclipses did not occur at perfectly regular intervals. When Earth moved farther from Jupiter in its orbit, the eclipses arrived late by minutes. When Earth moved closer, they arrived early. The only explanation was profound. Light needs time to travel. Rømer calculated roughly 22 minutes for light to cross Earth's orbital diameter, the first numerical evidence that light has speed, and therefore delay. Humanity's intuitive belief shattered. Sight was not contact, it was reception. Later thinkers reinforced the truth. Galileo attempted to measure the speed of light with lantern shutters, a clever idea doomed by physics. Light moved too fast for his instruments. But failure held insight. If light were instantaneous, his experiment would have shown it. Its inadequacy hinted speed, not infinity. The story advances to 1849, when Hippolyte Fizeau used rotating cogwheels and mirrors over kilometers of distance to clock light's travel time. For the first time, light's velocity was measured in terrestrial conditions, and it was finite. The universe was not immediate, it was delayed. By Einstein's era, light was no longer speed, it was the speed. It became the backbone of relativity, defining the structure of space-time. Time zones, simultaneity, causation all had to bend so that the speed of light remained inviolate. Overnight, physics changed from intuition to abstraction. Humanity had to let go of instinct to grasp truth. The universe did not broadcast instantaneously. It whispered, staggered through delay. What history reveals is something deeper than scientific evolution. It shows how resistant intuition is to cosmic reality. People long believed Earth was center because it felt like center. People long believed reality was synchronous because it looked synchronous. Light delay was too alien, too counterintuitive for ancient minds. Only when mathematics met telescope could truth override perception. This matters because it shows the brain's default settings are wrong for the universe. Sight appears immediate because the delay is tiny in local scales. 8 minutes from the sun feels instant because humans never evolved the cognitive machinery to sense 8 minutes of latency in nature. It required centuries of thinking, measuring, failing, retrying, recalibrating, all to reach a simple, now obvious conclusion. Everything you see happened earlier. The same logic applies today. When radio signals from spacecraft arrive late, mission teams do not think malfunction, they think physics. When astronomers study distant galaxies, they do not describe them as present. They explicitly describe their age at emission. This shift illustrates an intellectual maturation. Recognizing that perception is delayed is now embedded in every measurement we make. Hubble, JWST, ALMA, all these telescopes are designed not to see things as they are, but as they were. Astronomy is not watching. It is time forensics. Even daily technology quietly proves delay. GPS satellites must adjust for both relativity and signal transit time. If ignored, every map would drift kilometers off course each day. Your phone, your navigation, your communications, they work because engineers respect the lag of electromagnetic propagation. Modern civilization runs on the correction of light delay. Without it, nothing synchronizes. Thus, the idea that light feels instant is not an insight, it is an illusion. Evolution never needed to correct. History did that correction for us. Today, no physicist imagines immediacy, no astronomer assumes simultaneity. We now live in a conceptual universe where delay is not anomaly, it is architecture. Every observation includes its timestamp, every star includes its distance expressed as time. The past is not metaphor, it is literal sky. What history tells us, then, is profound. The universe has always been slow, only humans were late to notice. Our tools grew lenses, spectrometers, atomic clocks, and each improvement peeled away instinct. We learned to distrust immediacy. We learned that seeing is receiving, not touching. And once you internalize that truth, something shifts inside you. The sky becomes older, distance becomes delay, understanding becomes reconstruction rather than witnessing. In that sense, the history of light is the history of humility. It taught us that intuition is provincial and that truth requires instruments stronger than senses. It showed us that the universe is not designed to be understood, we must work to understand it. And the most astonishing consequence of this realization is not cosmic, but human. Even though light betrays immediacy, we still decipher reality. Our finest achievement is not speed, but comprehension, the ability to know that we are looking at echoes while still inferring the present beneath them. Light is slow, but the mind is not. History proved the delay. Intellect transcended it. That is why we continue exploring, questioning, calculating. The universe delivers its story late, but humanity remains capable of understanding it anyway. A light year is deceptively simple in definition. The distance light travels in 1 year. But simplicity conceals magnitude, and magnitude conceals meaning. To understand 9.46 trillion kilometers is not arithmetic, it is reconstruction of scale. Begin with the speed, 300,000 kilometers per second. In 1 second, light could circle Earth 7.5 times. In 1 minute, it could travel from Earth to the Moon and back repeatedly. Multiply this across hours, light sweeps the solar system like a brushstroke. But stretch this across days, weeks, 3 months, the numbers swell into incomprehensibility. A light year, computed directly, is speed multiplied by time, 300,000 kilometers per second times 31. 56 million seconds equals 9.46 trillion kilometers. A number so large it loses contact with intuition the moment it is spoken. So how do we restore meaning? We interrogate its construction. Consider 1 trillion, 1 million million. Imagine stacking grains of rice. 1 trillion grains would fill entire warehouses. Now multiply that storage volume 9 times. That is the scale you must imagine just to write the word light year. Everything fails because the brain did not evolve to feel trillions. Counting to 1 trillion at one number per second would require 700 years. Light does that journey nearly 10 times in a single year. The numbers are not just large, they annihilate understanding. Break the light year down by slices. Per second, 300. 000 kilometers. Per minute, 18 million kilometers. Per hour, 1.08 billion kilometers. Enough to span the Earth-Sun distance almost 8 times in a day. Every tick of the clock advances cosmic structure. Yet none of this resolves the psychological deficit. Humans do not feel scale through multiplication. They feel it through comparison. So imagine converting the light year into travel time using your fastest machines. If a commercial jet flew non-stop, it would take 2 million years to traverse the distance of a single light year. If you drove a car at highway speed, your journey would last 10 million years. If you boarded the fastest spacecraft humans ever built, the Parker Solar Probe, traveling at 700 kilometers per hour, you would still need over 500 years to make the trip. The light year is not large, it is practically unreachable. Now bring physics into the frame. When astronomers say a star is 50 light years away, they mean light has spent 50 years crossing 46 trillion kilometers, and only now arrives in your eyes. Distance and delay fuse. This is why kilometers collapse in astronomy. The kilometer was designed for continents and oceans, not galaxies. It is a ruler too short for reality. To compute how vast 46 trillion kilometers is found. Imagine compressing the solar system into a model. If the sun were a marble, Earth would orbit a few centimeters away. The nearest star would sit several kilometers down the road, beyond neighborhoods and hills. That gap, thousands to millions of Earth diameters, is what 46 trillion kilometers encodes. Still, something deeper lurks underneath the arithmetic. The light year is not merely a distance, but a cognitive correction. It teaches that kilometers, the unit used for roads, cannot speak the language of the cosmos. 46 trillion km is not a number. It is an indictment of intuition. Even physics itself leans on this replacement. When astronomers measure galaxies, star clusters, or cosmic voids, the kilometer vanishes from usage. Scientists speak in light years, kilolight years, megalight years. The reason is not preference, it is survival. Mathematics breaks down when numbers escape comprehension. The light year rescues meaning by merging time and distance. Let's look at this through a generational lens. If you could travel 1 light year per lifetime of fantasy, your lineage could explore star by star. Not because space shrank, but because you surrendered the illusion of immediacy. Even then, a journey across the Milky Way, 100,000 light years, would require 5,000 generations. The scale is grotesque. 46 trillion kilometers is merely the doorway. The universe beyond is built from distances that break thought. Yet here lies the remarkable twist. While the traveler cannot cross it, the thinker can conceptualize it. That is why the light year matters. It is not a number meant to be felt, it is a number meant to be understood. It allows the mind to stretch just enough to reframe reality. When someone says, "This galaxy is 50 million light years away," the brain does not imagine 50 million multiplied by 46 trillion kilometers. It imagines an envelope of ancient light, 50 million years old, arriving tonight. The number becomes narrative. Time becomes distance. Space becomes memory. This is why calculating 46 trillion kilometers is not a mathematics exercise, it is a philosophical upgrade. The computation reminds us that the universe is not sized for the body but for the mind. The light year becomes a unit of humility. It reduces ego, dissolves intuition, and forces comprehension to evolve. So while 46 trillion kilometers seems abstract, its true meaning is sharp. It tells you nothing human scale crosses space easily. It proves reality reaches you late, not instantly. It exposes kilometers as inadequate one, and it transforms distance into time. Astronomy never needed the kilometer needed astronomy to discover that it was too small. The light year replaced it not because it is bigger, but because it is more truthful. It reflects the structure of causality itself. Thus, when you hear light year, do not hear scale, hear delay, ignorance, patience, and memory. 9. 46 trillion kilometers is not a number but a boundary. The universe hides behind it, knowledge emerges through it, and humanity, small as it is, remains capable of understanding what it cannot reach. That is the quiet miracle of the light year. The human brain evolved to solve problems that existed on savannas, shores, and villages, not galactic voids. It was built for predators, food scarcity, social intuition, short-range planning and immediate feedback loops. Distance meant walking time. Effort meant calories. Threat meant minutes of reaction. Nothing in ancestral history required processing trillions. In fact, biological design actively prevents us from grasping such quantities. For most of evolution, if you could estimate near, far, or dangerously far, you survived. Precision beyond that offered no advantage. Our neural architecture reflects this. It compresses magnitude into binary categories, not numerical comprehension. That is why 10, 000, 10 million, or 10 trillion all feel vaguely big rather than distinct. This is the first reason the brain fails to absorb cosmic scale. We are optimized for survival, not truth. Cognitive shortcuts, heuristics allow fast decisions, not accurate ones. The light year, with its 46 trillion kilometers, is not a survival number. It has no emotional precedent. You have never seen, touched, or navigated anything remotely proportional. The mind cannot simulate it because simulation requires experience. Even when we try to scale up with analogy, the brain breaks. If you say 1 trillion seconds equals 31, 700 years, the brain does not feel 31, 700 years. It merely registers beyond imagination. Long numbers collapse into abstraction because neurons saturate. Cognitive overload forces simplification beyond human scale. This reveals an uncomfortable truth. Vastness becomes meaninglessly equivalent in perception. The brain uses compression not because we are intellectual failures, but because compression was evolutionarily efficient. The tragedy is that cosmic reality punishes this shortcut. Another layer of difficulty is temporal. We do not inhabit geological or astronomical time. Human life spans a century at best. Deep time spans millions, billions. The light year converts distance into time, and time becomes intolerable. Telling someone Andromeda is 5 million light years away implicitly tells them they are staring at light older than species. The brain instinctively protects itself by dulling the number otherwise. It threatens identity. Numbers that invalidate human significance trigger cognitive defense. The mind refuses to internalize scale that diminishes self. Neurologically, there is another barrier. The brain is logarithmic. We perceive increments relatively, not absolutely. Adding 1 book to a shelf of 10 feels noticeable. Adding 1 book to a warehouse of 1 million feels meaningless. Light years exist in the warehouse regime. Their increments are invisible. 10 light years or 10,000, our perception cannot scale. That is why awe turns to numbness. Yet, paradoxically, the brain can understand structure even when it cannot feel scale. We can grasp relationships. Light year equals time delay. Distance equals history but not quantity. We understand rules but not magnitude. This is how physics functions, meaning through pattern, not intuition. The light year, therefore, is not something we understand viscerally. It is something we comprehend intellectually. And this is precisely why scientific language evolved. Words like trillion, light year, megaparsec allow thought to reach where instinct cannot. The brain is incapable of directly imagining 46 trillion kilometers, but it can understand that this number implies impossibility of travel, inevitability of delay, and non-negotiable cosmic scale. That comprehension, not visualization, is the real achievement. So why do people often misuse light years ahead? Because metaphor hijacked meaning. The mind repurposes what it cannot internalize. Light years, originally indicators of delay and distance, became a phrase for advancement. This distortion further proves the brain's inability to hold literal meaning. It bends reality to emotional relevance. But the true light year remains immune to metaphor. Its numeric magnitude overwhelms intuitive machinery. Therefore, culture rewrites it to something digestible. Look deeper, and the failure becomes philosophical. If the brain fully comprehended light-year scale, existential crisis would be constant. A universe so immense and delayed shrinks human identity to irrelevance. Evolution cannot tolerate this. It would paralyze decision-making. Thus, the brain's indifference to astronomical numbers may not be ignorance, it may be defense. Yet here lies the hopeful inversion. Even though we cannot feel it, we can know it. The brain cannot imagine 46 trillion kilometers, but it can compute, infer, model, simulate, and communicate it. That leap from visceral inability to conceptual mastery is the signature of human cognition. We are not the species who understands scale emotionally. We are the species who transcends emotion through intellect. Our instruments, not instincts, grasp cosmic truth. Telescopes extend sight, mathematics extends memory, abstraction extends capability. The brain, alone, cannot hold the universe. The mind plus tools can. That is why we build equations, diagrams, and metaphors, not to simplify reality, but to compensate for evolutionary mismatch. In the end, the inability to feel the light year does not disqualify comprehension. It proves that humans think beyond design. The universe gives us distances too large to conceive. We answer with concepts too deep to dismiss. Light years break intuition, but they sharpen reasoning. The cosmic scale humiliates the senses, but it elevates the intellect. So the fact that 46 trillion kilometers feels impossible is not failure, it is transformation. The universe forced us to outgrow animal cognition. If the brain feels overwhelmed, it is because reality is larger than evolution expected, and yet humanity adapts through curiosity, mathematics, language, and imagination. We cannot imagine the light year, but we can grasp its consequences. That is our superpower. If you throw the audience directly into light years, their intuition dies before meaning can form. The mind needs footholds. It must climb scale, not leap it. That is why intermediate units, light seconds, light minutes, light hours, light days, light months exist. They are cognitive stepping stones that lift the brain from instinct into cosmology. Each one teaches a rule. Distance is time, and time is delay. Start where intuition still breathes. The light second. Light covers 300,000 kilometers in 1 second. That distance is almost exactly the Earth-Moon gap. Suddenly the moon stops being mystical and becomes 1 second away. You can feel that. It makes cosmic structure tangible. Conversations with Apollo astronauts were not instantaneous. They carried a heartbeat delay. That second is the first rung of the ladder. Climb up, the light minute. Multiply by 18 million kilometers. Now the scale slips from planetary orbit to interplanetary stretch. Communication with Mars rovers begins here. Depending on alignment, signals take between 2 and 22 minutes. The brain is forced to confront a new truth. Control is obsolete. Exploration becomes prediction. A light minute teaches that causality weakens with distance. Then comes the light hour one. 8 billion kilometers. Outer planets live in this regime. The Cassini spacecraft around Saturn sent back storms, rings, shadows, images always an hour old. Decisions were made with ancient information. A light hour dismantles the idea of now. It teaches that even inside our solar system, simultaneity is dead and delay is normal. Step further, the light day. 26 billion kilometers. This is where the human era collapses. Voyager 1, launched in 1977, traveling at 17 kilometers per second, has only recently grazed this boundary after nearly half a century. The light day is the first scale where our fastest machines seem archaic. It reveals that space reduces human accomplishment to footnotes. Then the ladder extends to the light week, 181 billion kilometers. No spacecraft has reached this scale in real-time communication. Humanity has not practically occupied the week delay regime. A light week is pure contemplation. It whispers that planetary travel is parochial. The solar system itself is enormous. Next is the light month, around 780 billion kilometers. This is where distance becomes mythic. If you sent a probe moving at astronomical velocity, decades pass before it can cross a light month. The brain begins to buckle. Intuition flatlines. The light month teaches a harder lesson. Space is not only big, it is indifferent. Only after climbing these rungs does the light year make sense. Without the ladder. 9. 46 trillion kilometers is noise. With it, the number becomes narrative, 1 year of light's effort. The ladder reshapes perception. Distance stops being geography and becomes time debt. The universe stops being a place and becomes a delay field. Each rung of this ladder fractures an instinct. A light second dissolves immediacy. A light minute dissolves feedback. A light hour dissolves simultaneity. A light day dissolves accomplishment. A light month dissolves relevance. The ladder teaches not that distance exists, but that distance is delay. That is the paradigm shift. You do not measure where something is, you measure when it is. This ladder also reveals why cosmic communication is tragedy disguised as mathematics. If a civilization 20 light minutes away sent us a message, it would become conversation barely. If it lived 20 light hours away, communication becomes commentary, not dialogue. 20 light days turns communication into historical exchange. 20 light months makes communication symbolic, not interpersonal. And beyond light years, communication becomes legacy, replying to minds long gone. Thus, the ladder of light units shows the deep truth. The larger the universe becomes, the more alone every intelligence is. But this is not defeatist, it is clarifying. Knowledge, not travel, becomes the bridge. If you cannot reach a place, you can still understand it. If you cannot speak in real time, you can still decode its message. The ladder does not collapse, hope it forces maturation. There is beauty in this structure. Each rung is an awakening. A light second tells you the moon is not far. A light minute tells you planets are neighbors. A light hour tells you our solar system is staggered but navigable. A light day tells you machines are fragile. A light month tells you ambition must grow deeper than motion. Only then does the light year arrive as a revelation rather than an abstraction. The ladder is therefore more than units, it is cognitive engineering. It rewires thought so that cosmic scale can be grasped not through emotion but through insight. You cannot feel 1 trillion kilometers, but you can understand 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month, and stacking them becomes intuitive stair climbing. Gradually, reality reveals itself. This is what science does at its best. It does not demand intuition to stretch, it builds scaffolding around intuition. Light units are that scaffolding. They elevate the mind to meet a universe designed without concern for our comprehension. Climbing that ladder does something to identity. It moves the human perspective from creature to observer, from passenger to thinker. It replaces how far with how long. It forces acknowledgement that the universe communicates slowly, and intelligence must thrive despite delay. That is why these intermediate units matter so deeply. They are bridges between biology and cosmology. They teach that comprehension is laddered, that grandeur must be scaled, not jumped. And once scaled, a new awareness blooms. The universe is ancient, delayed, enormous and yet understandable. Light seconds and light months are not trivia. They are rungs leading the mind out of instinct and into insight. Once the cognitive ladder is built, light seconds, minutes, hours, days. For months, the mind is finally ready to confront the light year, not as trivia, but as structure. A light year becomes the minimum meaningful unit for talking about stars. Distances inside a solar system bow to minutes and hours. Distances between stars overwhelm kilometers and obliterate ordinary measurement. The light year is not chosen, it is forced upon us by scale. Consider the gap between the Sun and Proxima Centauri, our nearest stellar neighbor. 24 light years. It sounds mild until you realize it is 4 years of light, travel through emptiness 4 laps around the clock at 300,000 kilometers per second. That is the shortest cosmic handshake we can imagine between suns. Kilometers choke on this number. Units collapse. Only the light year can carry the meaning. This shift marks a psychological evolution. When distances become measured in light years, the mind leaves geography and enters cosmology. Roads are irrelevant. Oceans are irrelevant. Flight times no longer matter. Instead, the only meaningful comparison becomes how long information needed to reach us. Distance is now a time interval, not a length. A star is not far. It is years away in awareness. Endocrines of Crusses, beyond Proxima Centauri. Sirius is 8, 6 light-years away. Alpha Centauri b is 4, 37 light-years. These numbers become anchoring points, the first rungs in an interstellar atlas. When astronomers map stellar neighborhoods, they do not draw kilometers, they draw years of light travel between systems. Space begins to look like a time network rather than a location grid. In this context, 1 light-year is the ruler that allows structure to form. Without it, stellar distance is incomprehensible. With it, stars become nodes spaced by information delay. The cosmos transforms from void to architecture. But why does 1 light-year, not 10, not 1,000, become foundational? Because it strikes a balance. It is just large enough to hold stellar separation while still being relatable through the ladder below it. 1 light month, 1 light week, 1 light day, and now you ascend to a unit so vast that traversing it requires physics to surrender. A light-year shifts narrative scale. The moon moves from 1 second to triviality. Mars's 20-minute gap shrinks to irrelevance. Saturn's 1-hour delay becomes a rounding error. The entire solar system fits into a few light hours of space. Within a few days of light travel, you are beyond the edge of humanity's reach. Past a month, you are cosmic. Past a year, you are interstellar. That is why 1 light-year becomes base currency. It is the first scale where human instinct fails completely and intellect must take over. The moment you use the light year, you implicitly accept 3 truths. Truth 1, you are viewing the past, not the present. The star you see at 30 light-years put that light on its journey when smartphones did not exist. Truth 2, communication is hopeless across that gap. A conversation with a world 30 light-years away would require 60 years to exchange 2 sentences. Truth 3, travel is conceptually broken. Even our fastest craft, scaled hypothetically, could never traverse it within thousands of generations. Thus, the light year is not simply a measure, it is a revelation of limitations. And yet, this unit is elegant because it maps the cosmic neighborhood. Within 100 light-years lie dozens of stars. Within 1,000 lie thousands. Within tens of thousands lie millions structured into spirals and clusters. A galaxy becomes a 100,000 light-year playground for theory, even if not for engines. Only when the light year exists can astronomy become cartography. Without it, the Milky Way would be undescribable. Every number would be incomprehensible. The light year also anchors classification. Nearby stars is less than 10 light-years. Regional stars, perhaps 100. Galactic structure spans tens of thousands. No other unit gives such sanity. Language changes as soon as light-years enter discourse. We stop saying far away and begin saying 200 light-years distant, meaning the starlight is 200 years old. The age becomes the meaning. The light year does not simply measure separation, it encodes history. This shift is profound. Cosmology becomes historiography. To map the sky is to map centuries, millennia, epochs of outgoing radiation. Accuracy demands using light years because everything else lies to intuition. One more layer. The light year reveals solitude. The nearest star is still 4 years of silence away. The next, nearly twice that. The night sky is full but unreachable. Light years measure not just distance but isolation. They remind us that every star is a sovereign domain, not a neighbor you can visit. The light year enforces respect. It also invites awe. Consider the star Deneb 2, 600 light-years away. Tonight you are seeing medieval light, arriving long after empires rose and fell. Or the Crab Nebula's remnant, whose light began its journey when ancient astronomers documented the explosion in 1054. The light year gives you the language to interpret these events. They are not just far, they are temporally displaced. In this way, the light year becomes the storyteller of the universe. Stars speak not in brightness, but in delay. Galaxies speak in millions of light years. Cosmologists converse in billions. Every deeper discovery expands the ruler. But the foundation remains the 1 year of light travel. Thus, the light year is the base unit of cosmic literacy. Without it, the sky is merely pretty. With it, the sky becomes a library. Astronomy becomes comprehension, not spectacle. Understanding arrives not as sensation but as insight. That is why 1 light year matters, not because it is precise but because it is transformative. It is the first number that forces the human mind to abandon instinct and embrace abstraction. It is where thinking becomes the only means of travel. In conversation, in science. In imagination, the light year is the doorway into the universe's true structure. One of the most persistent misunderstandings in science fiction, pop culture, and casual conversation is the assumption that the speed of light is merely a current technological ceiling, something humanity will eventually overcome with better engines, smarter designs, or bolder imagination. This belief hides a comforting fantasy. Progress makes everything possible. But in physics, the speed of light is not a milestone. It is a wall built into reality. We do not fail to exceed it because our technology is primitive. We fail because the universe forbids it. This distinction matters more than it appears. People assume limits are temporary. They see history as proof. Horses gave way to cars, cars yielded to jets, rockets beat jets. Each breakthrough encourages a narrative of infinite escalation. Yet cosmic structure breaks that arc. Light's velocity 300. 0.000 kilometers per second is not an engineering achievement. It is the maximum rate at which information can propagate. If anything could outrun light, causality would collapse, effects could precede causes, time ordering would fail. Reality itself would lose coherence. That is why physicists treat the light speed limit not as engineering frustration, but as foundational architecture. Every equation in relativity preserves that constant. Space-time contracts or dilates to protect it. Mass increases with velocity to block approach. Energy requirements diverge toward infinity. The universe is not waiting for better engines. It is coded in such a way that engines cannot escape the barrier without unraveling existence. This insight demolishes technological optimism in the best way. It frees us from false expectation. When we say faster than light travel is impossible, we do not mean we haven't figured it out. We mean physics disallows it without rewriting logic. Even hypothetical objects like tachyons, particles faster than light, create paradoxes so violent that theory treats them as mathematical artifacts, not plausible phenomena. The cosmos enforces strict traffic law. This shifts the conversation about space from propulsion to comprehension. Humanity can build rockets that go faster. But rockets do not change what is possible. The limit lives in space-time, not engines. The dream of star-hopping collapses because even perfect propulsion cannot outrun light. This exposes a deeper mistake in thinking. Treating space as a geography you cross is wrong. Space is a delay field, not terrain. The implication is uncomfortable but liberating. The universe pushes us toward knowledge, not motion. Every cosmic achievement so far reinforces this. Voyager travels 17 kilometers per second, yet after nearly 50 years, it has barely crossed 1 light day. If we redesigned Voyager and multiplied speed by 10, the cosmic result barely changes. Space swallows velocity. A star at 4 light-years remains inaccessible for thousands of generations. That is not engineering failure, it is reality refusing movement as strategy. The psychological shock comes when one realizes that no future engine, not antimatter, not fusion, not warp drives unless fictional physics are rewritten, bypasses this boundary. Many people cling to warp drive analogies as loopholes, but they miss the crucial part. Warp mechanisms require bending space-time, not outrunning light, because you cannot outrun light inside space-time. Even fantasy must respect the law. This reveals why physics treats light speed as sacred. Without a finite speed limit, causation dissolves. Signals would arrive before events happened. Observers would disagree fundamentally about sequences. Knowledge would be unreadable. The finite speed of light saves the universe from chaos. It is not inconvenience, it is structure. So when we talk about space and its vastness, we must abandon the premise that distance is challenge and embrace that distance is incarceration. Not because we are weak, but because the universe is built with horizons we cannot breach. And yet, that boundary is not nihilism, it is invitation. If you cannot outrun light, you must outthink it. Understanding becomes humanity's propulsion. Measurement, simulation, and inference replace traversal. Mental travel overtakes physical travel. The universe forces intelligence upward by blocking mobility. Light speed is a physical constraint that directs evolution of cognition. If we could travel anywhere instantly, we would never need astronomy, mathematics, or relativity. We would move instead of model. The universe denies that option, and in doing so, it requires the birth of science. The speed of light turns us into thinkers rather than wanderers, an unintended educational effect coded into space-time. We understand stars because we cannot visit them. We map galaxies because it is impossible to reach them. Knowledge becomes necessity. This reframing transforms the limit from depressing to empowering. If the universe made interstellar travel easy, comprehension would remain shallow. Ignorance thrives in immediacy. But delay forces intellect. The light speed limit also humbles our technological narrative. Humanity's great machines, rockets, probes, ion drives are not proof of ultimate potential but illustrations of cosmic irrelevance. We are children throwing pebbles across beaches, mistaking splash distance for conquest. The speed of light tells a different story. You are not meant to dominate space by moving through it. You are meant to understand space by reasoning about it. This is the philosophical transition astronomy demands. We stop dreaming of faster engines and begin dreaming of deeper thought. The universe does not reward velocity. It rewards inference. When people insist that future breakthroughs will beat light, they misunderstand both physics and opportunity. Light speed is not a ceiling to be broken, it is a boundary around which thought crystallizes. The universe is knowable even when it is unreachable. The barrier is not failure, it is filter. The speed of light separates physical possibility from intellectual possibility. It constrains motion but liberates comprehension. That is why it is the most profound constant in nature, not because it is big, but because it builds the shape of truth. Once you accept that light speed is not technological but structural, everything changes. Ambition becomes less about rockets and more about instruments, mathematics, and observation. Hope shifts from colonizing stars to understanding them. The future of humanity is not starflight but star insight. The light speed limit is the most powerful teacher the universe ever wrote. It forces us to confront scale, abandon instinct, transcend movement, and grow mind. It turns limitations into the beginning of astronomy, cosmology, and meaning. Proxima Centauri sits only 24 light-years away, the nearest star beyond the Sun. On paper, that looks neighborly. 4 years of light travel, not 40. The mind instinctively minimizes it, we call it close. But this closeness is linguistic, not physical. Those 4 light-years encode 40 trillion kilometers. It is the most intimate form of unreachable distance nature allows. Proxima is our first cosmic test, and we fail before we begin. If humanity ever attempted to reach Proxima, even with engines far beyond current capability, the journey collapses under timescales. A ship traveling at 0 kilometers per hour, 20 times faster than a commercial airliner would need over 90%. 000 years to arrive. At that rate, civilization would change many times before the mission finished. Nations would vanish. Languages mutate. Religions fade. Species evolve. Even a crude mission would become a lineage: children, grandchildren, descendants completing the voyage long after its origin story was forgotten. This is not travel, it is generational mythology. Push faster. Use something like Voyager, but upgraded tenfold, you still require millennia. Even with the Parker Solar Probe's extreme speed of 700 kilometers per hour, you still need roughly 6,000 years to reach Proxima. Humanity cannot sustain projects over centuries, let alone 6 millennia. Organizations collapse, meaning evaporates, motivation erodes. Space punishes intention, and communication, the alternative to travel, is equally hostile. Send a signal today to Proxima. It will arrive in 24 years. If there is a civilization there capable of responding, their reply returns to you 4 years later. A simple hello becomes an 8-year conversational cycle. You could live and die before receiving a second sentence. If diplomacy existed, negotiations would take geological time. If conflict existed, it would render response irrelevant. Communication is not exchange, it is ritual transmission. This forces stark realization. Even the nearest star is effectively unreachable in any personal or political sense. The Proxima problem becomes philosophical. Space is not merely large, it prevents relationship. Distance kills interaction, not through cost, but through delay. You cannot collaborate across 8-year loops. You cannot rescue, negotiate, or misunderstand and correct in real time. Even curiosity is throttled. Astronomers, therefore, stop thinking of travel. They think instead in terms of signal archaeology. If someone were transmitting from Proxima, their message would be 4 years old by the time we heard it. Their society could have changed, collapsed, transcended, or moved before we decode the first word. Communication is not dialogue, it is time capsule. This is why Proxima is the ideal case study. If the nearest star is this difficult, the rest of cosmic space is worse by orders of magnitude. Sirius, 12 light-years away, is already a 24-year communication cycle. Deneb, 600 light-years away, becomes unthinkable. The Milky Way's diameter, 100,000 light-years, ensures that civilizations across the galaxy live in mutually invisible epochs. You do not speak across the galaxy, you transmit into history. Proxima also destroys the fantasy of star colonization. Even if a breakthrough engine reached 10% of light speed, an impossibility under known physics travelers would still need 40 years to arrive. 40 years in radiation, isolation, deep space hazard, and that is just arrival. Return requires another 40. Communication becomes disconnected from lived experience. The mission becomes sacrificial, you go knowing you never return. Colonial sentiment collapses. Survival psychology rebels. This is why serious physicists frame Proxima not as a destination, but as a laboratory of humility. It is the boundary at which instinct fails, and reason must replace it. Observing Proxima teaches scale. Measuring Proxima teaches delay. Attempting to imagine travel to Proxima teaches futility. The only success left is understanding the mind, replacing motion. Yet there is a twist. The same barrier that kills travel fuels science. Because Proxima cannot be reached, we must study it remotely through spectroscopy, telescope imaging, exoplanet surveys. Proxima's known planet, Proxima b, sparked global excitement, not because we can visit it, but because we can infer its atmosphere, temperature, habitability. The gap forces reason to evolve. If travel were trivial, curiosity would stay primitive. Distance demands intellect. Communication models evolve too. Instead of expecting reply, scientists expect one-way insight. We do not wait for aliens, we decode their star's properties. We infer habitability long before contact is possible. Light-years convert humanity from wanderers into analysts. It is an enforced upgrade. Thus, Proxima's true meaning is not proximity, it is exposure of our limitations. Space does not need force fields to bar access. It uses time itself as the wall. You cannot tunnel through millennia by engineering. You must tunnel through understanding. This transforms the cosmic narrative. The universe is not a frontier waiting for expansion, it is a reality demanding interpretation. Proxima, despite being near, is a boundary marker. It tells us that exploration will not be physical, it will be cognitive. The future is not starships, it is telescopes, models, simulations, data networks, and minds capable of extracting truth from photons. That is humanity's redemption. We cannot reach Proxima, but we can know it. We cannot speak synchronously, but we can infer. We cannot migrate there, but we can detect atmospheres, climate cycles, planetary masses, magnetic fields, all without touching them. Knowledge becomes travel, so Proxima is paradoxical. the nearest impossible place, the unreachable neighbor. The first cosmic test we fail physically but pass intellectually. It is where fantasy dies and real exploration begins, the realm of the mind. When you realize this, the universe shifts. Space stops looking like territory and starts looking like information. Distance stops being obstacle and becomes revelation. Proxima, like every star, is unreachable yet discoverable. Inability becomes invitation. The lesson is brutal but inspiring. We are not the species that visits the stars. We are the species that understands them. A light year sounds adventurous, cinematic even. Popular culture filled it with rockets, warp jumps, and heroic voyages. But the truth is colder, more intellectual, and far more human. The light year is not a measure for explorers, it is a measure for observers. It does not belong to travelers, it belongs to thinkers. The universe gave us light years not to reach places, but to understand why we cannot reach them. Once you grasp this, the light year becomes almost poetic. It is the distance between curiosity and capability, between desire and limitation, the cosmic yardstick that reminds us where our agency ends and where interpretation begins. It functions less like a ruler and more like a mirror, one that reflects both our insignificance and our brilliance. Because the moment you learn what a light year truly is, you stop dreaming of voyages and begin practicing comprehension. Why is this unit so deeply associated with loneliness? Because every light year describes separation. It contains an implied absence, the gap between stars, the delay between minds, the gulf between civilizations. You never say 4 light years without also saying 8 years to hear back. You cannot speak of Proxima Centauri without speaking of centuries of waiting or thousands of years of unreachable effort. The light year is the geometry of disconnection. A civilization may exist 50 light years away. Yet for you, it might as well be myth unreachable, unknowable in any interactive sense. The universe may teem with life, yet remain silent forever because space enforces isolation. Distance is not the enemy, time is. Light year is a temporal prison disguised as spatial measurement. It is how cosmos prevents cosmic societies from erasing individuality. Each star system becomes its own island. Each intelligence is left to evolve alone. Culture becomes local. History becomes regional. Meaning becomes internal. Light year is exile written in physics, yet in the same breath, it is also a monument to knowledge. We cannot go, but we can know. That is not failure. It is transformation. The speed of light becomes a courier. Light year becomes archive. Every photon from distant stars is a message. Not a letter to be replied to, but a revelation to be decoded. A light year turns stars into libraries, not destinations. Astronomers do not cross space, they read it. They perform forensic analysis on photons to reconstruct worlds they will never touch. That is the extraordinary pivot where isolation becomes insight. The light year also redefines power. Civilizations that spread across planets might die unknown, but civilizations that interpret deeply might influence eternity. A single telescope can understand a galaxy faster than 1,000,000 ships could reach one. Suddenly, intelligence is not measured in propulsion, but in interpretation. Advancement becomes epistemological, not mechanical. Your greatness is not in conquering distance, but in extracting meaning from what arrives across it. That is why the light year is terrifying and beautiful. It replaces conquest with comprehension. It turns loneliness into clarity. Stars do not answer, but they tell stories. And we learned how to listen. This also forces a profound humility. We like to imagine ourselves as explorers, but the light year tells us we are witnesses. The universe never invited us to travel, it only to understand it. Our destiny might not be among the stars physically, but among their information cognitively. The future of exploration is not highways through space, it is highways through data. The spacecraft of the next era is analysis. The frontier is perception, because in a light-year-based cosmos, every star is too far, and every answer too delayed for conversation. The only reliable currency is knowledge, not presence. Our species becomes archivist, not colonizer. The universe becomes text, not territory. And suddenly, those billions of light years do not feel empty, they feel full, full of things to decipher, full of patterns to recognize, full of stories unfolding long before we existed. Perhaps the greatest irony is this: the same unit that proves our smallness is the same unit that proves our brilliance. Understanding the light year means surpassing the biological brain that evolved to walk, not calculate. We were designed for meadows and rivers and mountains, yet we measure galaxies. We were meant to smell rain and track footprints and navigate hills, yet we derive cosmic expansion equations. The light year exposes our limits and then showcases our defiance. So yes, the light year is a metric of cosmic isolation. It is also the measure of our greatest rebellion against insignificance thought, because the universe can silence our rockets, but it cannot silence our comprehension. We may never reach the stars, but we understand them. That is presence of a different kind, one that does not require engines or colonies, but cognition. In that sense, the light year is both wound and cure. It amputates the fantasy of interstellar travel, but stitches its replacement cosmic awareness. We do not live among the stars, we interpret them. We do not communicate with civilizations, we infer their probability. We do not greet Proxima, we analyze its spectrum. We are alone but enlightened. This realization shifts the meaning of existence itself. Perhaps what mattered was never expansion, but reflection. Perhaps our purpose was never migration, but metacognition. The light year forces us to face the possibility that the universe does not want empire, it wants understanding. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the triumph of a species is not how far it travels, but how deeply it comprehends. So when you hear the word light year, do not picture rockets or voyages. Picture silence, information, awareness, and a species learning its place. It is a measure of where we cannot go and of how far our minds already have. The universe remains unreachable, yet somehow knowable. And that is the story the light year tells, one of separation, insight, limitation, and transcendence. There is a particular moment, once the distances settle into your mind, not fully, because no one fully absorbs them, but enough that they begin to tilt your perception. It is the instant when scale transforms from abstraction into orientation. You stop simply knowing the numbers and begin feeling the consequences. That is when the emotion of the cosmos arrives, the paradoxical blend of insignificance and astonishment that only understanding can unlock. You realize first how tiny you are. It is unavoidable. One planet around one ordinary star among hundreds of billions in one galaxy among trillions. Your body is a brief molecular arrangement on a dust grain suspended in space-time, a creature whose lifespan is barely a flicker compared to cosmic processes. Appreciation of the light year amplifies this dramatically. Knowing that the nearest star is 4 years away, at light speed, forces a quiet truth. You occupy a vanishingly small region of influence. The universe has no obligation to notice you. It does not adjust itself for your hopes, nor bend trajectories to your meaning. It expands, evolves, drifts indifferent to whether your story unfolds or evaporates. Yet here lies the startling inversion. You are astonishing precisely because you can see this. Out of all the matter in the universe, almost all of it is silent. Hydrogen clouds do not reflect on their condition. Galaxies do not question their trajectories. Stars burn but do not contemplate burning. Only consciousness, this strange emergent property of stardust, arranged in nervous networks, recognizes scale. You, insignificant in structure, produce significance in awareness. And that awareness is not trivial. It is something the universe did not display for 13.8 billion years. Until recently, through beings like you. Light years mock our mobility but reveal our comprehension. The universe prevents us from traveling to the nearest stars but allows us to analyze their spectra, deduce their temperatures, chemical compositions, evolutionary histories, magnetic fields, orbital dynamics, and potential habitability. Imagine that contrast. You cannot reach Proxima Centauri, yet you can infer the age, density, surface activity, and planetary architecture of its system. The cosmic scale humbles your body but glorifies your mind. It reduces your physical importance but elevates your intellectual capacity. You become insignificant object, significant observer. This duality is the essence of cosmic emotion, the blend of existential smallness with cognitive transcendence. It is not despair, it is clarity. People often say they feel small when staring at the night sky, but smallness alone is not the correct emotional response. The accurate one is smallness combined with capability. You are dwarfed and yet aware, limited and yet interpretive, confined and yet curious. This condition, not physical power or conquest, is what makes us remarkable. Evolution prepared us to understand rivers and hills, yet here we are, grasping supernovae, mapping exoplanet atmospheres, measuring distances in light years, simulating galaxy evolution. The universe made us fragile but curious, short-lived but analytical, local but imaginative. The very limit that excludes us from the cosmos distance simultaneously gives us reason to understand it. We cannot reach the stars, so we learn to decode them. We cannot talk to civilizations, so we model the conditions of their existence. We cannot outrun light, so we bend mathematics to see beyond it conceptually. Our weakness becomes our method. This metamorphosis from explorer to interpreter is where cosmic emotion reaches its most dramatic crescendo. You look up and recognize not just beauty but structure. Stars are not lights, they are furnaces. Nebulae are not clouds, they are stellar maternity wards. The Milky Way is not a blur, it is a rotating disk of hundreds of billions of nuclear engines. You see photos from the James Webb Space Telescope, and you are not merely dazzled. You are witnessing ancient fossils of light that left their worlds before humans existed. That knowledge adds weight, texture, and almost sacredness to the experience of simply looking. You were built to navigate a savanna, yet you grasp galaxy morphology. The contrast is staggering. That is why the cosmos induces emotion, because comprehension emerges where it should not. There is also another side to this feeling: responsibility. If we are one of very few conscious species near this region of space, then our awareness matters. What we preserve, what we discover, what we pass on might not just be for us, but for the universe to know itself. Carl Sagan famously said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." That is not metaphor, it is physics expressing biology, expressing cognition. Stars do not witness each other. Gravity does not interpret expansion. Light travels but does not contemplate its journey. Only conscious observers convert movement into meaning. You are cosmic processing the universe, folding back on itself in reflection. That is why understanding the light year changes not only scientific thinking but emotional identity. You feel small, but you feel valued. You feel fragile, but you feel purposeful. You feel transient, but you feel embedded in something ancient and vast. And when you look at the night sky, you are aware, truly aware, that every point of light is a past event. Every photon is a courier. Every beam is a message crossing gulfs of time just to reach your retina. That is not poetic exaggeration, it is direct physics. Once this realization lands, existence feels different. Your stresses are real, but they are local. Your choices are personal, but they belong to a universe that produced entities capable of choosing. You are temporary, but you participate in something eternal through knowledge. The stars do not care about you, but the fact that you can care about the stars is cosmic irony at its finest. This is the emotional payload of science. It is not cold, it is humbling and exhilarating simultaneously. The light year does not just measure distance, it measures perspective. It injects context into consciousness. It forces your ego to collapse while your sense of wonder expands. And that expansion, that sense of awe, is what makes your smallness feel like privilege rather than punishment. So yes, you are small, but you are astonishing. You are not central, but you are aware. You are surrounded by distances too vast to cross, but you were given the ability to comprehend them, feel them, interpret them. The universe is silent, but you are capable of turning silence into meaning. That is the emotional climax the light year delivers. Insignificance transformed into the most extraordinary significance of all consciousness that sees itself in a universe too large to see back. By now, if you have followed this journey with attention and openness, something subtle should have shifted inside you. The word light year no longer sits as decorative vocabulary for sci-fi fans. It has become a dismantling tool, stripping away illusion, sanding down ego, and exposing the universe's architecture in ways the senses were never built to perceive. The scale of reality is no longer trivia, it is perspective. And perspective, once acquired, cannot be unknown. You began this exploration in kilometers and imagination. You end it in awareness that the light year is not merely a number, but the first unit that forces humanity into intellectual adulthood. It marks the boundary where instinct collapses and insight begins. It reveals a universe fundamentally out of reach, yet simultaneously legible through reason. It humbles you, but does not diminish you. It puts you in your place, but elevates your mind beyond your body's limitations. And this is where the true conclusion emerges. The cosmos does not reward travelers. It rewards observers. Stars do not answer rockets, they answer curiosity. They disclose themselves not through access, but through understanding. You cannot visit them, but you can decipher them. Every telescope ever built, every equation ever written, every spectrum ever studied is humanity taking the only possible form of cosmic participation, learning. So let this sink in the night sky will never be territory in which we walk. It will be the archive from which we read. The meaning of a light year is not conquest, but comprehension. That realization places responsibility on you not to build ships, but to build minds, not to escape Earth, but to expand awareness on it. Our greatest frontier is not external, it is internal, the capacity to perceive scale, integrate truth, tolerate insignificance, and still find wonder. The universe demands maturity. We must replace entitlement with humility and replace fantasy with insight. This is why scientific thinking matters, not because it supplies facts, but because it rewrites perception. It refines emotional reactions. It transforms fear of smallness into gratitude for awareness. By understanding the light year, you become more human, not less, more connected, not more detached. You discover that meaning is created in consciousness, not distance, here. At the edge of this conceptual journey, there is only one honest call to action worth speaking. Do not stop thinking. The universe is not just large, it is layered. Every fact you learned here is a doorway. The moon's light-second delay is a doorway to temporal physics. Proxima's unreachable proximity is a doorway to futility and ingenuity. The speed of light is a doorway to causality, relativity, and metaphysics. You are meant to walk through these doorways not because you owe the universe curiosity, but because curiosity is how you stretch the limits of being alive. Ask sharper questions. Doubt intuitive assumptions. Let awe coexist with analysis. The future does not belong to those who visit worlds, it belongs to those who understand worlds. That is why the closing request is not theatrical, it is sincere. If this journey altered your perception, even slightly, share it forward, not as trivia, but as perspective. Invite others to see the sky not as scenery, but as historical record. Encourage them to recognize that when they look up, they are not seeing stars, they are seeing timestamps, events that happened long before their lives began. And if you gained value here, if something expanded or quieted or awakened within you, then stay connected. Join the conversations. Subscribe to the Learning Arc. Add your mind to the small but growing community of people who choose understanding over ignorance, scale over ego, truth over comfort. You live in a moment where humanity holds telescopes that read the atmospheres of planets we cannot touch, where math reveals galaxies too distant for imagination, where images arrive from stars that died before humans existed. To squander this capacity by being passive is tragedy. To participate, to think, to learn, to question is the closest thing to cosmic relevance you may ever have. So here is the quiet invitation. Stay curious, stay critical, stay awake. Do not let the noise of the world shrink your vision back to sidewalks and routines. The night sky is not decoration, it is instruction. The light year is not exotic, it is boundary and teacher. Let it change how you measure yourself. You are small, yes, but you are astonishing in the way you can know smallness. That is worth nurturing. That is worth protecting. That is worth passing on. If the story of the light year inspired anything in you, deepen it. Carry it. Share it. Come back for more. Because perspective is not a destination, it is a discipline. And this was merely one chapter in a universe that has infinitely more to say.